Yo, CrumbleBob here again. That means we're back with another round of the best family relationship stories straight from the depths of Reddit. If you enjoy Old Bob's content, don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe, and let's get started. 4 years ago, when I was 19, I visited my aunt's house for a family barbecue. It was meant to be this nice, normal family event we had every summer, and I was actually looking forward to it, since I hadn't seen my cousins in a while. My younger cousin Tracy was 15 at the time, and we used to be quite close when we were kids, but had grown apart as we got older, which I guess happens. So I'm at my aunt's house, and I need to use the bathroom. There's only one upstairs bathroom that everyone uses, and I knock on the door, but I don't hear anything. So I figure it's empty, and I open the door. Tracy is in the shower, and I instantly close the door and apologize through it. I'm embarrassed, but it's not a major issue because accidents occur. And I instantly close the door and apologize through it. I'm embarrassed, but it's not a major issue because accidents occur. And the lock on that bathroom door has been faulty for years. Everyone in the family is aware of it. I go back downstairs, and I'm assisting my uncle with the grill, and everything appears normal. Tracy comes down about 20 minutes later, and she appears fine, and we're all eating and talking. I don't think anything of it because honestly, it was just an accident, and it lasted about 2 seconds at most, and I instantly closed the door and apologized. But then the following day, my mom calls me, and she's crying and asking me what I did to Tracy. I'm perplexed because I have no clue what she's referring to. And she informs me that Tracy told my aunt I deliberately walked in on her, and that I was staring at her and making her uneasy, and that she believes I might have done other things as well. I'm just standing there with my phone in my hand, feeling like the world is tipping. Because what on earth is she talking about? I attempt to clarify to my mom what truly occurred, that it was an accident, and that I knocked and heard nothing, and instantly closed the door. But my mom is crying and saying that Tracy is traumatized, and that my aunt believes her, and that the entire family is discussing it. I feel nauseous because this is outrageous and not what happened at all. My dad gets on the phone and he's shouting at me, asking me how I could do something like this to a child. I'm attempting to tell him that I didn't do anything and that Tracy is fabricating, but he's not listening. He informs me that I'm no longer welcome in their house and that they're ashamed of me. And I just hang up because I can't believe this is occurring. Over the subsequent few weeks, it gets progressively worse. Tracy apparently informs more people in the family that I was inappropriate with her, and she adds further details that aren't true. My parents completely cut me off and refuse to speak to me, and my aunt and uncle forbid me from their house. Most of my extended family ceases inviting me to things because they all credit Tracy's story. I attempt to contact various family members to explain my perspective, but no one wants to listen. They all state that Tracy has no cause to lie, and that I ought to accept accountability for my actions. I'm shouting into the emptiness that I didn't do anything amiss, and that it was an oversight, but no one minds. And I feel as though I am existing in some alternative reality where up is down and black is white. My parents alter the locks on their house, and my mom sends me a message stating that until I confess what I did and seek assistance, they don't wish to see me. My dad won't even recognize me when I attempt to call him. I'm 19 years old, and abruptly I have no family and no support network, and I'm utterly alone and heartbroken. I had to pause my college education because my parents were assisting with the costs, and now they refuse, and I cannot afford it by myself. I move in with a friend and secure employment, and I'm just barely managing financially. Emotionally, I'm shattered because my whole family believes I'm some sort of predator, when all I did was inadvertently open a bathroom door. The most challenging part is that I begin to question myself and ponder if perhaps I did something incorrect that I don't recall, or if there's something about me that made Tracy uneasy, even though I know deep down that I didn't do anything, and it was merely an accident. But when everyone you love and rely on turns against you, It causes you to doubt everything about yourself and reality. I spend months in therapy attempting to process this, and my therapist assists me in understanding that I'm not crazy and that what happened to me was unjust. But it doesn't alleviate the pain and it doesn't restore my family. I must learn to accept the reality that the individuals who were meant to love me without reservation opted to credit a falsehood over their own son and nephew. Moving ahead 4 years, and I've established a new existence for myself. I completed college via evening courses and student debt, and I have a respectable job currently and a girlfriend whom I love, and who is aware of my account and trusts me. I've remained in therapy throughout this period, striving to heal from the trauma of the loss of my entire family due to something I didn't commit. Then last week, my mom contacts me unexpectedly. We hadn't communicated in 4 years, and she's crying and saying that Tracy admitted that she fabricated the entire story and that she misrepresented everything, and that she's apologetic and wishes to rectify matters. I literally let go of my phone because I cannot comprehend what I'm hearing. Evidently, Tracy is also currently in therapy, and she informed her therapist about the falsehood. The therapist assisted her in understanding she had to disclose the truth. And Tracy phoned my aunt in tears and confessed that she invented the entire tale because she was experiencing a difficult period and sought attention. My mom is pleading with me to return home and stating that they're all deeply apologetic and wish to compensate me and that they ought never to have questioned me. I'm sitting there hearing this, and I'm not sure if I should laugh, cry, or scream, because where on earth were they when I needed them 4 years ago, when I was telling them the truth? Apparently, my aunt wants to hold a family meeting where Tracy will apologize to everyone, and they all want to bring me back into the family as if nothing ever happened. My parents are speaking about helping me repay my student loans and making up for the lost time, and I just feel numb, because how do you recover from something like this? I told my mom I require time to think about it, and I haven't called her back. Now she's been texting me daily, asking me to please come home and saying the family isn't the same without me. My dad even sent me a text, which is the first time he's reached out to me in 4 years, and he simply said he's sorry and he loves me. But I keep recalling all the nights I cried myself to sleep, wondering what I did wrong, and all the times I had to explain to new friends why I don't speak to my family, and all the holidays I spent alone, and all the milestones they overlooked. I'm not sure if I can simply forgive and forget, as they seem to expect me to. My girlfriend believes I should at least hear them out, but she also states she'll stand by whatever I decide, and I love her for that. But I'm so confused, angry, and hurt, and I'm unsure what to do, because a part of me wants my family back. But another part feels like they showed me who they truly are when they abandoned me without even trying to hear my side of the story. I suppose I'm asking if anyone has experienced something like this, and how do you even begin to rebuild relationships with people who discarded you based on a lie? Is it even worth attempting, or should I just keep the life I've built without them? Honestly, I'm terrified of letting them back in, only to have them hurt me again if something else happens. Update 1. I can't believe how many responses I received to my post, and I've been reading through them all, trying to figure out what to do. Honestly, some of you have given me a lot to consider, and others have just confirmed what I was already feeling, so thank you for that. Many people are saying I should take my time and not rush into anything, and that makes sense because I've been doing fine without them for 4 years. So there's no emergency here that requires me to make a decision right now. I think I needed to hear that because the way my mom is texting me every day makes it feel urgent, but it genuinely isn't. Some of you asked what Tracy's apology was like, and honestly, I haven't heard directly from her yet, which is peculiar because you'd think she'd want to call me herself if she truly feels bad about what she did. So far, it's just been my parents and my aunt telling me that she's sorry and wants to make things right, but I haven't actually heard her voice or gotten a direct apology from her. My mom called again, and I told her that I need Tracy to call me herself if she really wants to apologize. My mom got quiet and said that Tracy is still in therapy and working through some things and that she's not ready to talk to me directly yet. I replied, well, then she's not ready to have me back in the family either if she can't even face what she did. That seemed to catch my mom off guard, and she began backtracking, saying that Tracy is simply scared and doesn't know what to say. I told her that I was scared too when I was 19 and had my entire family turn against me, but no one cared about that then, so why should I care about Tracy's feelings now? My mom got quiet again. I also asked my mom why they didn't believe me 4 years ago and why they were so quick to cut me off without even trying to hear my side. She said that Tracy was so convincing and seemed so traumatized that they felt like they had to protect her. I asked her if it ever occurred to them that I might be telling the truth, and she admitted that they never really considered it. That hurt more than I expected it to because it confirms what I already knew, which is that when push came to shove, they chose to believe a 15-year-old's word over mine without any evidence or investigation. They were willing to discard their relationship with me based on nothing but her word, and that reveals precisely how much trust they placed in my character. My mom kept asserting that they're different people now, and that they've learned from their errors, and they wish to make things right. But I told her that I'm a different person now too, and the son they abandoned 4 years ago no longer exists. They can't just pick up where they left off as if nothing occurred. I think what troubles me the most is that they seem to expect me to be grateful, that they're willing to take me back, like they're doing me some kind of favor, when really they should be begging for my forgiveness and understanding that I might not be able to give it to them, and that would be entirely justified. I've been reflecting a lot about what kind of relationship I could even have with them if I did decide to try, and I cannot envision us ever getting back to where we were before because there's too much damage, and too much time has passed, and too much trust has been broken. Maybe that's okay, and maybe a limited relationship is better than no relationship, but I don't know. The thing that keeps recurring to me is that if Tracy could lie about something this serious for attention, then what else might she lie about in the future? If my parents were willing to disown me once based on her word, then what's to stop them from doing it again if she decides to cause more drama? I don't believe I can live with that uncertainty hanging over my head. I'm going to keep taking my time with this choice and not let anyone rush me into moving faster than I'm at ease with. I think for now I'll ask Tracy to write me a letter explaining precisely what occurred and why she lied and what she's doing to ensure it never recurs before I even consider meeting with any of them in person. Update 2. Well, this situation just continues to get more complex, and I'm starting to grasp why Tracy wasn't ready to speak with me directly because, apparently, there's more to this story that my parents conveniently omitted when they first called me. Tracy finally did phone me 2 days ago, and the conversation was nothing like what I anticipated. Honestly, it made me even angrier than I was before because the whole thing is so much worse than my parents made it appear. So Tracy phones me and she's weeping from the start, and she tells me she's sorry and that she knows what she did was wrong. But then she begins explaining why she did it, and this is where it gets truly messed up because apparently her parents were in the midst of a truly nasty divorce at the time, and her dad was unfaithful to my aunt. Tracy knew about it and was keeping it hidden. She said she was angry at all the adults in her life for lying and keeping secrets, and she wanted them to suffer the way she was hurting. She believed if she made up a story about me, it would unite everyone to protect her and make her feel like people cared for her. I'm hearing this and thinking, are you serious right now? I inquired if she grasped that she ruined my life for 4 years simply because she was having feelings about her parents' divorce. She began weeping harder, stating she didn't imagine it would escalate as much as it did, and that she believed people would simply be upset with me for a short period. Then it would pass, and everything would return to normal. I informed her that I had to pause my college education, lost my whole family, and spent 4 years in therapy coping with the trauma of being blamed for something I didn't commit. She repeatedly apologized, but an apology doesn't restore those 4 years, and an apology doesn't reverse the harm she inflicted on my bond with my parents. Then she revealed something that made my temper flare, which is that after several months, once she realized how gravely everyone was treating it and how entirely they had severed ties with me, she wished to retract it. However, my aunt advised her that if she altered her account, then people would assume she was fabricating to shield me, and it would exacerbate matters. So she ought to simply remain silent and let it dissipate naturally. Therefore, not only did Tracy deceive initially, but my aunt actively prompted her to persist in lying, even when Tracy desired to confess. This signifies my aunt was aware there was a chance Tracy was being untruthful, and opted to allow me to remain estranged from the family instead of risking the shame of acknowledging they might have erred. I questioned Tracy if my parents were aware of any of this, and she stated she doesn't believe so but isn't certain. Honestly, at this juncture, I don't know what to credit, because everyone in this family appears comfortable with deception when it benefits them. So how can I rely on anything any of them utter? The most aggravating aspect is that Tracy continued discussing how challenging these 4 years have been for her, living with the culpability and how she's been in therapy attempting to process it. I wanted to yell at her that she chose to endure guilt, while I was compelled to endure banishment and disgrace, and the utter ruin of my family connections. She inquired if I could ever pardon her, and I informed her truthfully that I don't know, and that absolution isn't something she gets to request from me, merely because she finally chose to speak the truth. If she genuinely wishes to make amends, she needs to comprehend that this process concerns what I require, not about making her feel better regarding what she did. After we ended the call, I phoned my mom and asked her if she was aware of my aunt instructing Tracy to continue lying. My mom became very silent and stated that my aunt brought up something about not wishing to confuse Tracy by coercing her to alter her narrative, but that they never discussed it thoroughly. I believe my mom is being untruthful, or at least not disclosing the complete truth to me. I also questioned my mom why no one ever considered investigating Tracy's assertions or requesting specifics, or attempting to corroborate her account in any manner. My mother stated they were merely attempting to safeguard Tracy, and they didn't inquire for specifics or try to confirm her account in any fashion. My mother mentioned they were simply aiming to shield Tracy and wished to avoid traumatizing her further by making her re-experience what occurred. I retorted, "What about safeguarding me and ensuring you weren't ruining an innocent individual's life?" My mother began weeping, stating they made errors and they're regretful and they merely desire their son back. However, I informed her that the son she had 4 years prior relied on his family to support him and believed they understood him sufficiently to know he would never commit something like what Tracy blamed him for. That individual is no longer here and won't return. I believe what pains me most is recognizing that my family was prepared to discard me so readily and that they never truly knew me whatsoever. For if they had, they would have realized that I'm not capable of what Tracy charged me with, and they would have at least attempted to hear my perspective before severing ties with me entirely. My girlfriend believes I should insist on a family gathering where everyone must recognize precisely what they did incorrectly and how it impacted me before I even contemplate having any sort of connection with them. Honestly, that sounds like a good idea because I'm tired of everyone acting like this is just a misunderstanding that we can move past without truly dealing with what happened. I'm also thinking about asking my aunt directly what she knew and when she knew it. Because if she was encouraging Tracy to keep lying, then she's just as responsible for this mess as Tracy is. I don't see how I can have a relationship with someone who actively worked to keep me away from my family for years. Update 3. I had the family meeting, and it was everything I expected it to be, which is to say it was a complete disaster. and confirmed everything I already suspected about these people. Honestly, I think it gave me the clarity I needed to make my final decision about this whole situation. My parents arranged for everyone to meet at my aunt's house, which felt odd because that's where this whole nightmare started, but whatever. When I got there, it was my parents, my aunt, and uncle. Yes, they got divorced during the time I didn't see them, and my uncle was specifically here because of this matter. And Tracy. They all looked like they were going to a funeral, which I guess in a way they were because this was definitely the death of any chance we had at rebuilding our family relationships. Tracy was sitting on the couch looking like she'd been crying, and my aunt had her arm around her like she was the victim in all this. My parents were sitting across from them looking nervous and uncomfortable, and no one seemed to know how to begin the conversation. So I just jumped right in and said I wanted to hear from each of them precisely what they did wrong and how they intended to make sure nothing like this ever happened again. My mom spoke first, and she said she was sorry for not believing me and for cutting me off, and that she should have listened to my side of the story. I said, okay, but why didn't you? She said that Tracy appeared so upset and convincing, and they were simply trying to protect her. I said, so you opted to protect her feelings over my life, and she had no answer for that. My dad said he was sorry for refusing to talk to me, and that he responded out of anger and fear. I asked him what he feared, and he said he was afraid that I might actually be dangerous. I said, so you really thought your own son was capable of sexually assaulting a child? He looked down at his hands and nodded, and that hurt more than anything else he could have said. My aunt spoke next, and this is where things got really ugly because I asked her directly about telling Tracy to keep lying. She immediately got defensive and said that she never told Tracy to lie, and that she was simply trying to protect her daughter from further trauma. I said, so you knew Tracy might be lying, and you opted to let me stay exiled, rather than risk finding out the truth? She started shouting at me, saying that I was distorting her words, and that she was simply being a good mother and protecting her child. I shouted back that she was being a good mother by destroying someone else's child, and that she actively took part in sustaining this lie, even when Tracy wanted to tell the truth. Tracy finally interjected and said that she told my aunt she wanted to retract her story after a few months, and my aunt told her that people might not believe her if she altered it now, and that it would be better to just allow it to fade away. My aunt's face turned pale, and she said that Tracy was misremembering what happened. Tracy started crying and said no. She recalled precisely what happened. My uncle tried to play peacemaker and said that everyone made mistakes and we should concentrate on moving forward. But I told him that this wasn't about mistakes. This was about intentional choices that ruined my life, and that some things can't be repaired by simply saying sorry and having a group hug. I asked Tracy what she was doing to ensure she never lies about something so serious. Again, she said she's in therapy and learning better coping skills. I said, that's great for you, but what about the next time you're upset about something? Are you going to ruin someone else's life to feel better yourself? She said no, but how can I trust that when she already demonstrated her willingness to lie about serious things when it benefits her? The entire situation deteriorated into everyone talking over each other, making excuses and attempting to downplay what they did. I realized that none of them truly grasped the seriousness of what they put me through, and they all appeared to believe this was merely some family drama that we could resolve with enough apologies and good intentions. My mom kept stating that families forgive each other and that we needed to move past this for everyone's benefit. I told her that I had already moved past it by constructing a new life without any of them, and that I don't require their forgiveness or their family, because I've learned to live without both. My dad inquired what it would take for me to offer them another chance. I said it would take a time machine to return 4 years and have them believe me and support me when I needed them most. And since that's impossible, there's nothing they can do now to compensate for abandoning me when I was telling the truth. Tracy inquired if there was anything she could do to make amends. I told her that she could live with the consequences of her choices the same way I had to live with the consequences of hers, and that perhaps next time she'll think twice before destroying someone's life for attention. She started crying again, but honestly, I no longer care about her tears. I told them all that I valued them finally admitting they were wrong, but that it's too little, too late. I've created a good life without them, and I see no point in risking that by letting back in people who already showed they'd cast me aside the moment someone made an accusation against me. My aunt grew angry and said I was being harsh and unforgiving. I replied that was rich, coming from someone who spent 4 years being cruel and unforgiving to an innocent individual, and that if she wanted forgiveness, perhaps she should have considered that before helping to cover up her daughter's lie. I departed after that, and I've been disregarding their calls and texts for the past week. Honestly, I feel lighter than I have in years because I finally have closure, and I know for certain that I made the correct decision in forging a life without these people. Get ready, because the next story is even worse. I'm 28 now, but this whole situation began when I was 21 and home from college for winter break. My younger brother Max was 19. He was 18 when he began dating her, and at that point he had this girlfriend, Sia, who was 17. They'd been together for around 8 months, and she was always at our place. My parents adored her. They believed she was this sweet, innocent girl of 17. They'd been together for roughly 8 months, and she was constantly around the house. My parents loved her. They felt she was this sweet, innocent girl who was beneficial for Max, as he'd always been somewhat wild, and she appeared to calm him or something. I never truly paid much mind to her because, frankly, I was focused on my own things. I was studying and had an internship arranged for the summer, and I was simply aiming to get through my junior year. But whenever I was home, she'd always find excuses to chat with me and inquire about college and my courses. Initially, I figured she was simply being friendly or perhaps considering her own college plans, as she was a senior in high school. But then matters turned strange, and I mean truly strange. For instance, she'd come over when Max wasn't present and my parents were at work, and she'd linger, waiting for him, even though I'd inform her he wouldn't return for hours. She'd sit too near me on the couch when we were all watching TV and make remarks about how mature I was compared to Max, and how college guys must be considerably more interesting than high school boys. I'm not dumb. I could sense where this was heading, and I wanted no part of it because, first, she was my brother's girlfriend, second, she was still in high school, and third, I simply wasn't interested in her that way at all. She wasn't unattractive or anything, but she simply wasn't my type, and the entire situation felt wrong on every level. So one evening during that winter break, Max had gone out with his friends, and my parents were at a Christmas party. I was just relaxing in the living room playing video games when Sia arrived. She stated she was looking for Max, and I informed her he wasn't home and wouldn't return until late, suggesting she should probably just text him. But instead of departing, she came in and took a seat beside me on the couch. She began doing that thing again where she was sitting far too close and speaking about how she believed I was so much smarter than Max, and how she wished she could date someone more mature. I could sense where this was leading, so I rose and said I was going to prepare some food and asked if she desired anything, attempting to change the topic and create some space. But she pursued me into the kitchen, and as I was retrieving items from the fridge, she approached me from behind and placed her hands on my back, saying something about how she'd always found me attractive, and how she pondered what it would be like to be with someone like me instead of Max. I spun around, took a step back, and told her she had to stop, reminding her she was with my brother and this was improper. That's when she truly went for it. She moved nearer, attempting to wrap her arms around my neck, and said that Max would never need to know, adding that she thought about me constantly. I could tell she was about to attempt to kiss me, so I gripped her wrists, pulled her hands away from me, and firmly stated, "No, absolutely not. This isn't happening, and you must leave right now." She had a look on her face I'd never witnessed before. a mix of anger, hurt, and embarrassment all at once. She claimed I was being cruel, that she knew I desired her, and questioned why I was acting like such a jerk about it. I told her once more that she had to leave, that this conversation never occurred, and we were never going to discuss it again. She departed, but she was crying, and I felt bad about that. But I also knew I had done the correct thing. I mean, what else was I meant to do? Let her cheat on my brother with me and potentially face charges? That would have been far worse, and I assumed she'd move past it. Things would return to normal, and we'd all simply pretend it never happened. 2 days later, Max arrived home, and he was enraged, absolutely losing his temper. He began shouting at me about how I was a sick pervert, and how I could do such a thing to him. I had no clue what he was referring to until he mentioned that Sia had recounted everything, and that she was traumatized, crying, and didn't wish to see anyone. I attempted to explain what truly occurred, but he refused to listen. He just kept shouting about how I'd tried to force myself on his girlfriend, how she'd had to fend me off, and how she was now afraid to be alone with any guys because of what I'd done to her. I stood there, mouth agape, because I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I informed him that was utter nonsense, and that she was the one who made advances toward me, and I was the one who turned her down. But he claimed I was lying and attempting to make her look bad because I was ashamed of being discovered. Subsequently, my parents arrived home and overheard us yelling at one another, and Max recounted his version of events. My mother began to cry, and my father stared at me as if I were some kind of monster. They didn't even wish to hear my account. When I attempted to explain what truly happened, my father cut me off, saying that Sia was just a child, and I was supposed to be the adult in the situation, and how could I betray their trust like this? I kept trying to tell them she was lying, and that I would never do such a thing, but my mom said Sia had no reason to lie, and that she was obviously traumatized, and why would she make something like that up? I said maybe because I rejected her and she was embarrassed and angry, but they insisted I was being disgusting, trying to blame the victim. The next few days were absolute hell. Max refused to even glance at me, and my parents were treating me as though I had a contagious illness. They refused to dine with me, and my mom would hardly utter a word to me, while my dad kept uttering remarks about his deep disappointment and how he no longer recognized who I truly was. I attempted to speak with them one-on-one to clarify the true events, yet none of them would pay attention. My mom said she couldn't stand to hear the specifics, and my dad said I had to accept accountability for my deeds and cease attempting to justify myself. Max simply informed me to keep clear of his girlfriend, and that he would never pardon me for my actions. What was most difficult was that Sia still came by, but now she'd behave nervously and fearfully around me. For instance, she'd recoil if I entered a room, or she'd ensure she was never by herself with me. It was such blatant pretense, but everyone else fully believed it, and it only made me seem more culpable. I ultimately cut my winter vacation short and returned to school ahead of schedule, because I could no longer tolerate being in that home. I thought perhaps once some time had elapsed, they would settle down and understand that her account lacked logic. But when I returned home for spring vacation, things were equally terrible, if not more so. They had seemingly been speaking with Sia's parents, and there was talk about whether to report it to the authorities. My dad had a serious talk with me and stated that if I confessed to my actions and offered a genuine apology, then perhaps we could resolve this together as a family. But if I continued lying and making Sia out to be some sort of manipulator, then I was going to destroy any chance of fixing this. I told him I had nothing to be sorry for because I didn't do anything wrong, and he said that was my choice, but I needed to understand that actions have consequences. I knew right then that they were never going to believe me, no matter what I said or how much evidence I provided them. I finished my junior year and got that summer internship, and when it was over, I didn't go home. I found a job in another state and got my own apartment and started building my own life. For a while they would call and try to get me to come home, but I told them I was no longer welcome there since they'd made it clear They believed I was a rapist. My mom would cry on the phone, saying they just wanted me to get help and take responsibility, and that we could move past this, if I would just admit what I'd done. I'd tell her there was nothing to confess and nothing to move past because I didn't do anything. And eventually they stopped calling. That was 7 years ago, and I haven't spoken to any of them since then. I created a good life for myself, and I have an excellent job now, and I'm engaged to a wonderful woman who knows the whole story and believes me. I thought that chapter of my life was closed forever. But then last month I received a call from my mom. She was crying and saying she was sorry, and that they'd made a terrible mistake, and they wanted me to come home. Evidently, Max was arrested for dealing drugs, including significant quantities of cocaine and heroin, and he's facing 15-20 years in federal prison. Sia ended their relationship right after his arrest and began seeing another man at once. My mom explained that she was boasting to others about how she had deceived my entire family and how foolish they had been to trust her falsehoods. My mom recounted that Sia had confessed to multiple individuals, that she had fabricated the entire narrative concerning me because she was ashamed that I had turned her down and wished to discredit me. She never anticipated it would escalate as it did, but once it started, she couldn't retract it without appearing deceitful. So now my parents are aware of the truth, and they regret it, and they wish to set things straight. They want me to come home for Max's sentencing hearing to show family support. My mom was weeping on the phone, saying she acknowledges their error, but I remain their son, and families grant forgiveness to one another, and they require my presence now more than ever. I heard all of this, and then I told my mom that it was too late for amends, and that they'd made their decision 7 years prior, when they chose to trust a teenage girl instead of their own son. I'd forged a life independent of them, and I neither needed nor desired them in it any longer. She began to weep more intensely and saying that they were experiencing the most difficult period of their lives, and how could I forsake them at their greatest hour of need? I stated they had forsaken me first when I required them most, and I owed them nothing. Then I ended the call. Ever since, I've received calls and messages from relatives asserting I'm being too severe and that my parents erred, but they are genuinely apologetic, and I ought to grant them another opportunity. Even my fiancé believes perhaps I should contemplate speaking with them at minimum. Everyone continually states that families commit errors, and that clinging to resentment for this duration isn't beneficial, and that my parents have absorbed their lesson and are enduring sufficient hardship with Max heading to prison. However, I constantly reflect on how they discarded me so readily due to falsehoods, and how they never even attempted to listen to my version of events. I feel no sympathy for them whatsoever. Truly I don't. Merely because their favored son proved to be a drug dealer doesn't imply they can come groveling back to the child they discarded like refuse. A drug dealer doesn't imply they can come groveling back to the child they discarded like refuse. So, am I the jerk for declining to pardon my family and assist them during this challenging period? Or am I warranted in excluding them from my life permanently? Update. 1. Perusing all your feedback has been quite beneficial and somewhat overwhelming. I believe I needed to hear from unfamiliar people that I'm not irrational for remaining upset about this, as everyone in my actual life continually behaves as though I should simply move past it. Several individuals inquired for further details about what transpired once the truth became known, so I will provide some of that. Apparently, what occurred was that Sia attended a party with her new boyfriend, and while intoxicated, she began boasting about how she'd manipulated my entire family. She was telling others about how she'd developed a crush on me, and upon my rejection, she resolved to get revenge by making everyone believe I was a creep. Someone at the gathering knew my family, and the information reached my parents. When they confronted Sia regarding it, she initially attempted to backtrack, but eventually she confessed it was entirely fabricated. She claimed she was merely a foolish teenager who didn't consider the consequences, and she was sorry. but the harm had already been inflicted. My mother phoned me the day after they discovered it, and that's when she informed me of everything. She was weeping on the phone, stating she couldn't believe they'd been so mistaken about me, and that she'd forfeited 7 years with her son due to falsehoods. But frankly, hearing her weep did not make me feel better. It merely made me more angry. I continue to ponder how swiftly they were to believe the worst about me, and how they never even contemplated that perhaps I was speaking the truth. They simply concluded that some girl they'd known for 8 months was more credible than their own son, whom they'd raised for 21 years. Since my initial post, I've received additional calls from family members attempting to persuade me to contact my parents. My aunt phoned me yesterday and mentioned that my mom has been distraught since discovering the truth, and that she's been stating she doesn't know how to live with herself, understanding what she did to me. My aunt added that my parents have begun attending therapy, and that they recognize they erred significantly, and they simply desire an opportunity to rectify it. However, I informed her that some matters cannot be rectified, and that they possessed 7 years to ascertain I was speaking the truth, and they elected not to. I also learned more about Max's predicament, and it's quite severe. He's been dealing for a minimum of 3 years, and the feds have him dead to rights. His attorney is attempting to negotiate a plea agreement, but he's still facing a minimum of 10 years. Evidently, my parents are broke from trying to pay for his legal fees. I am now questioning if they would have even contacted me had Max not been apprehended, and if they weren't dealing with all this stress and financial pressure. Perhaps they only want me back now because they need support and money, not because they genuinely regret what they did to me. My fiancé and I have been discussing this extensively, and she believes I should at least contemplate having one discussion with my parents to hear them out, not necessarily to pardon them, but just to get closure for myself. However, I don't know if I want closure, or if I just want them to remain absent. I've been doing well without them for 7 years, and my life is good, and I'm content. So why should I allow them back in merely so they can make me unhappy once more? Because that is what will occur, I am certain of it. They will make promises and state they have changed, but the harm is inflicted, and it cannot be reversed. Some individuals in the comments suggested I should take the high road and pardon them because clinging to resentment is detrimental. But I don't feel like I am clinging to resentment. I feel like I have progressed, and they are the ones attempting to pull me back into their turmoil. I am not sitting around brooding over what they did to me. I am living my life and being content. If that entails keeping detrimental individuals out of my life, even if they are related to me, then that is what I will do. I believe what truly affects me is that they anticipate me to simply overlook 7 years of being treated as though I do not exist, and return hastily now that they require me. As if I am supposed to be thankful that they at last realized I was speaking the truth throughout. Well, I am not thankful, and I am not returning, and I do not care if that renders me the antagonist in their narrative. They wrote me out of their narrative a long time ago, so they do not get to write me back in now that it is convenient for them. Update 2, I received a call from Max's attorney 2 days ago, and that was a discussion I never anticipated having. Apparently, Max has been inquiring about me and wishes to speak with me before his sentencing hearing. His attorney stated that Max has been reflecting extensively in jail, and he wishes to apologize for not trusting me regarding what truly transpired with Sia. He's hoping I might contemplate drafting a character letter for his sentencing. I informed the attorney that Max and I haven't communicated in 7 years, and I know nothing about who he is currently or what sort of character he possesses. The attorney mentioned that Max acknowledges it's a slim chance, but he's desperate, and he's recognized he erred significantly with his family, and he desires to attempt to rectify matters. The attorney also revealed some details about Max's case that I was unaware of previously. Evidently, he commenced dealing drugs approximately a year after I departed home, and it started modestly but intensified rapidly. As per the attorney, Max has stated that losing his brother was among the factors that propelled him into a downward spiral. Now I'm uncertain how I feel about that because, on the one hand, I'm not accountable for Max's decisions, and he's a mature man who chose to deal drugs. But on the other hand, I continue to ponder if circumstances would have differed if I'd remained and contended more vigorously to make them trust me instead of simply departing. My fiancé believes I should converse with Max at least once, not necessarily to assist with his sentencing, but merely to listen to what he has to state. She believes it might aid me in comprehending why my family was so swift to trust Sia over me, but I'm not certain I wish to comprehend that. I've been contemplating this for days now, and I cannot decide what the correct course of action is. I also learned my parents have been telling people in our hometown what truly happened and how they were wrong about me. Apparently, some people are giving them a hard time, saying they should have known better than to believe a teenage girl over their own son. But I keep thinking of Max sitting in jail and asking for his brother, and I wonder if I'm being cruel by not even talking to him. Because whatever else occurred, he's still my little brother, and he's looking at spending the next 10 to 20 years in prison. I recall when we were children and how close we used to be. He would follow me everywhere and copy everything I did. When I taught him how to ride a bike and how to throw a football, I keep thinking how that little boy grew up to choose drugs and dealing over having a relationship with his brother. But then I also think of him screaming at me and calling me a pervert, and how he wouldn't even look at me for those last few weeks before I left home, and how he never once in 7 years tried to reach out or question whether maybe Sia was lying. I don't know what I'm meant to do here, and everyone has opinions, but nobody has answers. I'm weary of thinking about it, but I can't seem to stop. It's like this whole thing has opened a wound I thought was healed, and now it's bleeding all over my life again. What I'm truly angry about is that I was finally at peace with all of this, and now they're forcing me to face it again when I didn't ask for any of this. I didn't ask for Max to be arrested, and I didn't ask for Sia to admit, and I didn't ask for my parents to come back crawling. I was doing well with my chosen family and my new life, and now I'm back to dwelling on all this old pain, and I resent them for placing me in this position. Like, even now when they know they were wrong, they're still making everything revolve around them and their needs. Maybe I'll talk to Max, and maybe I won't. I haven't made up my mind yet. But if I do, it's going to be on my terms, and for my reasons, not because his lawyer believes it might help his case, or because my parents think it will make them feel better about their actions. Update 3. I ended up visiting Max, and I'm still processing everything that transpired during that conversation. It was nothing like I anticipated, and I'm genuinely more confused now than I was before. The jail visit was precisely as depressing as you'd imagine. Max looked awful. He's lost a lot of weight, and he appears older than his 26 years. When he saw me, he began crying before he even spoke, which was not something I was ready for. He told me he was sorry, that he'd been wrong about everything, and that he'd thought of me every day for the past 7 years. Learning the truth about Sia had destroyed him, because he realized he'd thrown away his relationship with his brother over lies. Then he told me something I hadn't anticipated. He said that even after that first argument we had about Sia, he'd begun to doubt her story. There were small things that didn't make sense, and she would alter details when she told the story to different people. He'd begun to question if she might be lying. He said he'd even spoken to some friends about it, and they'd told him that her story seemed suspicious, and that it was unusual how she kept lingering around our house all the time, if she was truly traumatized by what had allegedly been done to her. I asked him why he kept silent if he had doubts, and he said he was embarrassed, and didn't want to admit his girlfriend had deceived him. By then, our parents were so certain of my guilt that he didn't believe they'd listen to him anyway. He also said that after I left home, he'd tried to mention his doubts to our parents a few times, but they dismissed him and said he was merely feeling guilty for not protecting his girlfriend better. They did not want to hear him challenge Sia's story. This is the part that really messed with my head. Max said that about 2 years after I left, he'd had a massive argument with Sia about something else, and she'd confessed that she had lied about me. She'd told him the complete truth about how she'd made advances toward me, and I'd turned her down, and she'd fabricated the assault story because she was embarrassed and angry. When I heard this, I could not believe it. I asked him why he didn't inform our parents right then, and he said that he'd attempted to, but Sia had pleaded with him not to and promised she'd tell them herself eventually. She'd persuaded him that if the truth emerged, it would ruin both their families, and everyone would despise her. Max said that he'd been intending to tell our parents anyway, but then Sia had threatened to end her life if he revealed her lies. She'd stated that she couldn't live with everyone knowing what she'd done, and that her life would be finished if the truth emerged. So Max had remained silent because he didn't want to be accountable for Sia harming herself. But he'd also begun using drugs to cope with the guilt of knowing I was innocent and being unable to do anything about it. And that's how he'd gotten into dealing and ended up where he is now. I sat there listening to all of this, and I didn't know whether to feel pity for him or furious at him. He'd known I was innocent for almost 5 years and never spoke up, but he was just a kid trying to keep his girlfriend from ending her life. He said that breaking up with Sia and having her instantly start dating someone else had made him realize that she'd been manipulating him all along. She'd probably never meant to tell the truth and had just been using the suicide threat to keep him silent. Max mentioned that's when he truly spiraled and began dealing more serious drugs, feeling he'd lost everything important to him and no longer caring what became of him. Now he's looking at 20 years in prison, and he knows it's his own doing, but he also realizes things might have turned out differently if he'd been braver. By the end of our talk, we were both crying, and I was at a loss for words. I'd spent 7 years believing he'd never doubted Sia's account, and had picked her side over mine without any uncertainty. But now I discover he'd known the truth for years and had been living with that guilt. I told him I understood why he'd stayed silent about the suicide threat, but that didn't alter the fact I'd spent 7 years believing my entire family thought I was a rapist. Knowing he'd had doubts didn't compensate for the years of silence. He said he understood that, and he wasn't asking for forgiveness because he wasn't worthy of it. He just wanted me to know he'd never truly thought I could do what Sia accused me of, and that losing me had been the worst thing that ever happened to him. I left that jail visit feeling utterly exhausted, and I still can't make sense of it all. I understand why Max remained silent, but I'm also angry that he allowed me to suffer for years when he could have said something. My fiancé believes this changes things and that perhaps I should consider reaching out to my parents, now that I know the full story. But I'm not certain it truly changes anything because the end result remains the same. I'm unsure if I'll write that character letter for Max's sentencing or not. I keep deliberating about all of this, and I wish I'd never agreed to see him because now I have even more complex feelings to manage. Before this visit, I could at least convince myself that my family had never cared about me enough to question Sia's lies, but now I know that's not entirely accurate. Final update, I decided to write the character letter for Max's sentencing, and I attended the hearing. I'm glad I did, even though it was one of the hardest things I've ever had to do. Max ended up getting 12 years instead of the 20 they were originally talking about. His lawyer mentioned that the family support and character letters made a difference in the judge's decision, so I suppose it was worth it, even though I'm still not certain how I feel about everything. My parents were at the sentencing hearing, and seeing them again after 7 years felt surreal. They both appeared older, and my mom had gray hair I'd never seen before. When they saw me, my dad began crying, which was something I'd never witnessed him do before. After the hearing, they approached me, and my mom tried to hug me, but I stepped back and told her I wasn't ready for that. My dad mentioned they understood and were simply grateful I'd shown up, knowing they had much to atone for. We ended up speaking for about an hour in the courthouse cafeteria, and it felt awkward and painful, yet also somewhat essential. They apologized repeatedly and stated they knew sorry wasn't sufficient, but they wished me to understand they'd never cease loving me and thinking of me. My mom stated that not a single day had passed when she didn't regret how they'd managed everything. My dad mentioned they'd allowed their emotions to overrule their judgment, and that they ought to have known their son better than to think he could do such a thing. They'd failed me as parents in the most terrible way possible. I informed them that their apologies didn't reverse everything, and that I'd established a life without them that I was content with. I wasn't certain if there was a path back from what had transpired between us. They mentioned they understood, and that they didn't anticipate me to forgive them immediately, or perhaps ever. But they hoped perhaps someday we could have some sort of relationship again, even if it differed from what we'd had previously. I've been contemplating the conversation for weeks now, and I still don't know what I wish to do. I don't believe I can simply return to being their son as if nothing occurred, but I also don't know if I want to spend the remainder of my life entirely estranged from them. My fiancé and I have discussed perhaps beginning with occasional phone calls or emails to see how that progresses, not immediately returning to a full relationship, but rather leaving the option open for something in the future. I also chose to visit Max once more before he was transferred to federal prison, and our conversation was better than the initial one. He has accepted accountability for his decisions, and he isn't blaming anyone else for his current situation. He requested that I keep in contact with him while he serves his sentence. I informed him I would consider it, and that I wasn't making any commitments, but that I was pleased we'd had the opportunity to clarify what truly transpired all those years back. Regarding Sia, I learned that she relocated from our hometown and no one knows her whereabouts, which is likely for the best. I'm uncertain what my relationship with my family will resemble moving ahead. I realize I can't simply resume where we stopped, but I also understand that clinging to anger indefinitely won't benefit me. Currently, I'm concentrating on my wedding preparations and my profession, and on constructing the life I desire with my fiancé. If my parents wish to be a part of that life someday, then they will need to earn it, because forgiveness is not something they are owed simply because they are family. I still believe I was justified in cutting them off when I did, and I don't regret safeguarding myself from their harmful influence. However, now that I know the full story, I'm prepared to consider the possibility that people can change, and that perhaps there's a way forward that doesn't involve completely severing ties. Let's dive straight into the next disaster. 6 years ago, when I was 16, my parents passed away in a car accident. It was sudden and awful, and I don't want to go into all that because it still hurts too much to think about the details. The important thing is that after the funeral, I had no place to go, and my sister Haley, who was 28 then and married, was the only family I had left who could take me in. I recall sitting in the lawyer's office once everything was settled with the will, insurance, and all that legal stuff. Haley was there with her husband Mark, and I just assumed I would go live with them, because where else was I meant to go? They were my sole family. The lawyer was discussing guardianship papers, and Haley kept glancing at Mark, and Mark kept shaking his head and making those faces like he smelled something unpleasant. I didn't grasp what was occurring at first because I was still in shock about everything. Then Haley took me aside after the meeting and told me she couldn't take me in because Mark didn't want kids in the house, and they weren't ready for that sort of responsibility. She said she was sorry, but she believed it would be better if I went into the system. Simply like that. She called CPS herself and informed them I needed a foster placement because she couldn't care for me. I recall standing there thinking this had to be some kind of mistake, because who does that to their own sibling? I asked her if we could discuss it further, and perhaps Mark would reconsider. If we explained that I wouldn't be an issue, and I could find work and assist with costs, and I wouldn't bother them. But she simply kept repeating that Mark was steadfast in his choice, and she had to honor her husband's wishes. She kept referring to him as her husband as if that made everything acceptable. as if being married to someone mattered more than being related by blood. The CPS worker arrived to pick me up from Haley's house, where I had been staying for precisely 3 days following the funeral. She kept asking Haley if she was certain about this choice, and Haley simply kept nodding and saying yes, she was certain. Mark stood behind her the entire time with his arms crossed, appearing relieved that I was departing. I had 2 garbage bags of my belongings because that's all I could fit from my old room at my parents' house, and Haley didn't even help me carry them to the car. Foster care was precisely as bad as you imagine it would be, and I'm not going to delve into all the specifics, because this isn't about that. But I aged out at 18 with virtually nothing, and had to learn how to be an adult with no family support and no safety net. I held 2 jobs throughout community college, and then transferred to a state school, where I worked in the dining hall and took out loans for everything else. Somehow I succeeded in graduating with a degree. Now I'm 22, and I have my own apartment and a respectable job at a small firm. I'm not wealthy, but I'm secure, and I've established a life for myself that I'm proud of, even though it was hard as hell to get here. I don't communicate with Haley often, perhaps a text on birthdays and holidays, but that's generally it. Honestly, I prefer it that way because seeing her name on my phone still makes me feel ill. Last week, Haley phoned me, weeping, and I mean truly weeping like she could barely speak. Initially, I thought something dreadful had occurred, like someone passed away, or she was injured. She was sobbing and saying she required assistance and had no other place to go. And I was trying to soothe her enough to comprehend what was happening. Eventually, she managed to explain that Mark had been unfaithful and abandoned her, and she had no other place to go, and I was trying to soothe her enough to comprehend what was happening. Eventually, she managed to explain that Mark had been unfaithful and abandoned her, and she was pregnant and due in 2 months, and she had no funds and no place to reside. Evidently, Mark had been having an affair with someone from his workplace for months, and when Haley discovered this and confronted him, he simply packed his belongings and moved in with the other woman. He informed Haley he never wished to be a father anyway, and the baby was no longer his concern, and he was filing for divorce. Haley had been a stay-at-home wife for their entire marriage, so she had no employment and no recent professional experience, and Mark had emptied their joint accounts before he departed. She inquired if she could stay with me merely until the baby arrived and she could decide what to do next. She swore she wouldn't cause any bother and would assist with groceries and tidying, and she simply required a safe place to have her baby. She was weeping the entire time she told me this, and I felt sorry for her because being left alone while pregnant sounds terrible. But then I recalled standing in that CPS office and seeing her sign documents to give me up. I told her no. Simply, no, I cannot assist you. She became silent for a moment and then began asking why not, and stating she's my sister, and family supports family, and where else was she meant to go? I wanted to laugh because family supports family, truly? That's the argument she was using after what she did to me? But I simply told her that she made her decision 6 years ago when she picked her husband over her brother, and now she had to face the repercussions. She began weeping more intensely and saying, that was distinct, because I was merely a child, and children are adaptable, and I would be okay in foster care. But this was distinct, because she was an adult with a baby, and she couldn't simply recover from this. That made me so furious, I began shouting at her through the phone, informing her that being a child made it worse, not better, and that I wasn't adaptable. I was traumatized and forsaken by the only family I had remaining. Haley kept repeating she was sorry and acknowledged her mistake, but she couldn't alter the past and needed help now, and I was the only person she could turn to. She mentioned Mark had cut her off from all her friends over time, and she had no one else. Our parents were gone, so it was just us, and we had to stay united. I informed her that we stopped being family the moment she called CPS, and then I ended the call. She's been calling and texting continually since then, but I'm not replying, because I have nothing else to say to her. Honestly, I don't trust myself not to utter something truly cruel if I speak with her again right now. My coworker is aware of some of my past, and when I shared what occurred, she suggested I should assist Haley because she's pregnant and fragile, and sometimes people make poor choices when they're young, married, and influenced by their spouse. My coworker believes I should give Haley an opportunity to set things straight, and that aiding her would be the more mature thing to do. Yet I keep recalling those 3 days I stayed at Haley's house after our parents passed away, and how Mark would exit the room whenever I entered, and how Haley would apologize for him, saying he just required time to get used to the thought of me being there. I recall believing that if I could just be faultless, silent, and useful, then perhaps they might reconsider and allow me to remain. However, it didn't matter what I did because Mark had already determined he didn't want me there. I'm unsure if I'm being petty or justified, and I don't know if I ought to feel guilty for rejecting a pregnant woman who happens to be my sister. I find myself wavering between the thought that she merits this and the belief that two wrongs do not make a right. So, am I the jerk for declining to assist my sister, who reported me to CPS when I was underage, and now seeks my help because her husband abandoned her, pregnant and penniless? Update 1. I've been reviewing all the comments and messages, and truthfully, it's been intense and a reassuring way to confirm that I'm not irrational for feeling as I do about this circumstance. Many of you shared your own accounts of foster care and family abandonment, and it makes me feel less isolated, even though I wish none of us had to endure these experiences. Haley has continued to call and text, and yesterday she appeared at my apartment complex, which I hadn't anticipated, and honestly somewhat alarmed me, because I never provided her with my address. She must have obtained it from someone or located it some way, and that seems like a breach of boundaries, but I suppose that just shows the extent of her desperation at present. I was returning home from work around 6 p.m., and there she was, seated on the steps outside my building. She appeared dreadful, as if she hadn't been sleeping or eating well. She's visibly pregnant now, and observing her pregnancy made this entire situation feel more tangible in a way that phone conversations didn't. She rose when she spotted me and began approaching, and I nearly turned around and departed. But then I considered that foolish because this is my building and my residence, and I ought not to have to flee. She began speaking right away before I could utter a word, informing me she'd been living in her car for the last few nights since she couldn't pay for a hotel any longer and was afraid something might happen to the baby if she continued sleeping in the car. She mentioned she visited a women's shelter, but it was at capacity, and she was on a waiting list, though it might be weeks before they had room for her. I inquired what became of their house, and she replied, Mark listed it for sale before he departed, and as both their names were on the mortgage, she couldn't prevent him. The real estate agent informed her she needed to vacate by the close of this week. All their belongings were in storage, apart from what she could fit in her car, and she'd been subsisting on fast food and sleeping in parking areas. She appeared dreadful. Haley continued repeating, please, endlessly, and extending her hand as if to grasp my arm but not quite making contact, and I could tell she was weeping, yet attempting to hide it from me. She stated she was aware she didn't merit my assistance after her actions, but she wasn't requesting it for herself. She was requesting it for her baby, who had done nothing wrong and didn't deserve to be born in a car or a shelter. That affected me more than I wished to concede, because she's correct. The baby had done nothing wrong. But then again, neither did I when I was 16 and required assistance. I informed her of that, and she said she was aware and remorseful, having reflected daily on her actions since Mark's departure, as she now grasped the feeling of having no refuge and no one to rely on. She mentioned Mark had persuaded her at that time that I'd be more advantaged within the system because it possessed resources and initiatives to aid children like me, and that retaining me would simply encourage dependency rather than fostering self-reliance. She said she trusted him because she was immature and foolish, and wished to maintain her marriage's happiness, and she imagined I would comprehend when I matured. I questioned whether she genuinely held that belief, or if she was merely stating it now due to needing something from me. She fell silent for an extended period, and then confessed she recognized its wrongness. Even then, but she feared Mark abandoning her if she insisted on sheltering me. She said he had menaced her with divorce if she became my legal guardian, and she couldn't bear losing her spouse and her parents simultaneously. That infuriated me so much I began shouting at her right there on the thoroughfare, and I didn't mind who overheard me because I was finished feigning composure about this. I told her that she picked a man who threatened to abandon her for looking after her own brother, and now that very man had left her, regardless. So what was the use of giving me up for a marriage that didn't even endure? That very man had left her regardless. So what was the use of giving me up for a marriage that didn't even endure? Haley simply stood there weeping as I shouted, and she didn't attempt to defend herself or offer excuses. She merely kept repeating, "I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry," as if that would resolve anything. Eventually, I ran out of things to shout, and we simply stood there gazing at each other, and I could see how much weight she'd shed everywhere but her stomach, and how frightened she appeared. I told her I required time to think, and she said she lacked time. She had to be gone by Friday, and it was already Tuesday. I said that wasn't my concern, and she nodded and said she knew, but inquired if she could give me her new phone number, because she had to cancel her old plan, and was now using a prepaid phone. She jotted the number on a slip of paper and passed it to me, saying she'd be at the McDonald's on 5th Street tomorrow night if I wished to talk further, since they were open 24 hours, and she could charge her phone there. Then she went back to this beat-up Honda Civic that I assumed was where she'd been sleeping and drove off. I went up to my apartment and instantly phoned my friend Nathan, whom I've known since community college, and recounted everything that had occurred. Nathan is aware of my entire history, as we've been friends for ages, and he's among the few individuals I fully trust. He heard everything and then stated he believed Haley was getting her due, but that didn't imply I needed to let her suffer merely to make a statement. He mentioned if I wished to assist her, I ought to do so because I genuinely wanted to help, not due to her being family or feeling regret. He also stated if I chose not to help her, that was equally valid, and I shouldn't permit anyone to pressure me into an uncomfortable action. Nathan consistently offers sound counsel because he doesn't attempt to dictate my actions. He merely assists me in determining what I truly desire to do. I spent the entire last night pondering it, and I keep returning to the infant since that's genuinely the core issue now. Haley made her decision 6 years prior, and she's facing the repercussions of that decision, but her infant didn't make any choices, and doesn't merit suffering for Haley's errors. Concurrently, I keep considering what message it conveys if I assist her now. Does that imply what she did to me was acceptable because family ultimately pardons all? I do not wish to forgive her, and I don't believe I should be obliged to forgive her simply because she's currently in difficulty. I'll likely go to that McDonald's and speak with her once more because I need to grasp more of her circumstances and precisely what she's requesting of me prior to making any choices. I'm not asserting I'm going to help her, but I believe I require further details to make the best decision for myself. I will provide another update after I talk to her, presuming she is indeed present, and this isn't a tactic to elicit sympathy from me. I still lack full trust in her because deserting your family essentially severs that trust permanently, but I wish to hear her perspective. Edit 1. A few of you in the comments inquired why she can't get state aid or support from social services, and I questioned her about that yesterday. She said she applied for every program she could conceive of, but the majority of programs have queues, and the urgent aid she received will only finance a few additional days in a hotel. She's attempting to secure employment, but she's 8 months pregnant, and most establishments will not employ someone on the verge of taking maternity leave. Update 2. Indeed, I visited McDonald's last night, and Haley was present exactly as she had stated she would be, seated in a corner booth with her phone connected to the outlet, and a coffee cup that appeared to have been sipped slowly for hours. She noticed my entry and waved, but remained seated, and I could discern she was attempting not to appear overly keen or forlorn, despite both of us knowing she embodied both sentiments. I got myself a coffee and sat opposite her, and we simply gazed at each other for a moment, unsure how to begin this discussion. She appeared even worse up close, and I could tell she'd been weeping profusely because her eyes were quite swollen and red. Her garments no longer fit properly due to the pregnancy, and she was sporting this oversized hoodie that likely belonged to Mark. Eventually, I requested her to clarify precisely what she required from me and for what duration, as I wasn't making any choices without knowing every detail. She mentioned she required somewhere to reside until the baby arrived, and perhaps a few weeks subsequent to that, while she recuperated and determined her subsequent actions. She was hoping to secure subsidized housing, but the waiting list was extensive, and she needed an address to get mail and benefits. Haley stated she would sleep on my sofa and wouldn't anticipate me to supply food or anything further, merely a roof over her head, and entry to a bathroom and shower. She pledged she wouldn't introduce any drama into my life, wouldn't invite people over, and would honor any regulations I established. She also mentioned she would perform chores and cook to earn her upkeep, and wouldn't merely be a burden lounging around waiting for me to look after her. I inquired what would occur after the baby arrived and she regained stability, and she replied she didn't know, but she hoped we could restore some form of relationship as siblings. She said losing Mark made her realize she'd thrown away the only real family she had left for someone who never truly loved her anyway, and she wanted to try to fix what she broke between us. That irritated me because it seemed like she only cared about rebuilding our relationship now that she had no one else, and I told her that. She admitted that was probably true, but said sometimes it takes losing everything to realize what truly matters, and she was hoping it wasn't too late to matter to me again. I asked her why she truly chose Mark over me back then, and if she was being truthful about his threats to leave her. She was quiet for a long time and then said it wasn't solely about Mark threatening divorce. It was also about her being afraid of raising a teenager when she didn't know what she was doing. She said our parents never taught her how to be responsible for someone else, and she was terrified of messing up my life even more than it already was messed up. Haley said Mark made it easy to choose him because he gave her an excuse to avoid taking responsibility for me when she was already overwhelmed by grief and fear. She said she convinced herself foster care would be better for me because the system had trained professionals who knew how to help kids cope with trauma and loss. I told her that was bullshit because she could have learned how to help me and we could have worked it out together. But instead, she took the easy way out and abandoned me when I needed her most. She agreed that it was bullshit and said she'd been living with the guilt of that choice every day since then, but especially since Mark left, because now she knew what it felt like to be thrown away by someone you trusted. We talked for over 2 hours, and I learned more about Haley's marriage than I ever wanted to know. Evidently, Mark was controlling and manipulative and slowly isolated her from everyone she used to be close with, including some friends from high school and college who might have helped her now if she hadn't cut them off years ago because Mark didn't like them. He persuaded her to quit her job after they got married because he said he made enough money for both of them, and he wanted her to focus on being a good wife. Then he used the fact that she didn't work as a weapon against her whenever they argued, telling her she was useless and couldn't survive without him. When she brought up having kids, he would shut down the conversation and say they weren't ready financially, even though they certainly were. Haley said she started wanting children more as she got older, but Mark kept making excuses and putting it off, and she was starting to think it would never happen. Then she got pregnant by accident, and when she told Mark, he was furious and accused her of doing it intentionally to trap him. He insisted she get an abortion, and when she refused, he began treating her like an enemy instead of his wife. She said the affair began after she told him about the pregnancy, and she thought he did it specifically to harm her and give himself an excuse to leave. He told her that other woman was younger and not desperate to have children, and would never try to tie him down the way Haley did. I asked her if she thought any of this justified what she did to me, and she said no, absolutely not, and she wasn't trying to make excuses, just trying to help me understand how she acted towards me, and she said no, absolutely not. And she wasn't trying to make excuses, just trying to help me understand how she reached that point. She said Mark didn't compel her to call CPS. He just made it clear that choosing me meant losing him, and she made the wrong choice because she was weak and selfish and frightened. Haley began crying again and said she knew I had every right to hate her and never forgive her, but she was asking me to help her anyway because she had nowhere else to turn. She said she wasn't asking me to forgive her or forget what she did, just asking me to be a better person than she was when I was the one who needed help. That affected me deeply because it was precisely what I'd been struggling with all along. Do I help her because it's the right thing to do, or do I let her face the consequences of her choices alone? She was right that helping her would make me a better person than she was, but I didn't know if I wanted to be a better person or if I wanted her to suffer the way I suffered. I told her I needed more time to think, and she said she understood, but reminded me that she was living in her car full time. She gave me the key to a storage unit where her belongings were, and said if something happened to her, I should sell everything and keep the money as payment for all the birthdays, holidays, and graduations she missed. That made me start crying, which I did not expect and definitely didn't want to do in front of her. But thinking about her dying in childbirth in the back of a Honda Civic just broke something inside me. Haley reached across the table and touched my hand and said she was sorry for putting me in this position, and she knew it wasn't fair to ask this of me after what she did. I pulled my hand away because I wasn't ready for physical comfort from her yet, but I told her I would give her an answer by today. She nodded and said, "Thank you for even considering it," and that no matter what I decided, she wanted me to know that she was proud of the man I'd become despite having no help from her. I departed the McDonald's feeling more bewildered than when I arrived, because speaking with her made her appear more human and less like the antagonist I'd been harboring in my mind for 6 years. She remained the individual who abandoned me, but she was also a frightened pregnant woman with nowhere to turn, and I didn't know how to reconcile those two aspects. I called Nathan again when I got home and told him everything we talked about. He said it seemed like Haley had truly reflected on what she did and understood how wrong it was, but that didn't undo the harm she caused me. He said the question wasn't whether she deserved my help. The question was whether helping her served my own interests and values. Nathan reminded me that I'd always said I wanted to be the kind of person who helps others when I can, and that maybe this was a chance to prove that to myself. He also said that if I helped her and things went badly, I could always ask her to leave, and I'd still know that I tried to do the right thing. I've been thinking about that all morning, and I think he's right that this is more about who I want to be than about what Haley deserves. I keep picturing her baby being born in a car or a shelter, and I can't live with that image, even if Haley brought it on herself. I will phone her in an hour and tell her she can remain with me until the baby is born, and for 2 weeks after that. I will set firm boundaries in an hour and tell her she can remain with me until the baby is born, and for 2 weeks after that. I will set strict boundaries regarding what I expect from her and what will happen if she violates my trust again. This does not mean I forgive her, and it does not mean we're family again. It just means I'm choosing to help because that's who I want to be. I will update again once she moves in, and I see how this actually goes in practice, because making this decision and living with it will likely be very different things. Brief update, a quick update because some people have been asking about Haley's financial situation and why she can't get money from Mark. Simply put, he cleaned out all the accounts Haley had access to, and the divorce is ongoing and will take a good while to conclude. Update 3. Haley has been staying with me for 5 days now, and it's been odd and tense and surprisingly all right, all at the same time, which I hadn't anticipated when I made the decision to let her stay on my couch. I imagined it would be dreadful and uncomfortable every minute, but it's actually turned out more normal than I had expected. Perhaps that's because we are both adults now, rather than her being an adult and me being a traumatized child. She has been honoring her promise about staying out of my way and doing chores around the apartment. When I return home from work, she has usually tidied something or begun preparing dinner, and she always asks for permission before she does anything, such as use the washing machine or take a shower. It's almost as if she's a courteous housemate who happens to be my estranged sister, rather than the family member who deserted me. The initial night was the most difficult because I repeatedly woke up, recalling her presence, and feeling angry about it, despite being the one who opted to assist her. Haley attempts to converse during dinner, but she doesn't insist when I'm not in the mood to talk. She informs me about doctor appointments and baby preparations, and asks if I require anything from the store when she goes out, but she doesn't attempt to act as though we're close, or that everything is fine between us. I value that because I'm not prepared to pretend this is a normal sibling relationship. Yesterday, she had a doctor's appointment and inquired if I would drive her because using the bus while this pregnant was becoming challenging for her. I agreed because it appeared to be a reasonable request, and the doctor's office was only 15 minutes from my apartment. The appointment proceeded well, and the baby was healthy and expected to be born in about 3 weeks. While we were in the waiting room, Haley indicated a poster about postpartum depression and asked if I believed she would be a good mother considering how she managed being responsible for me. That surprised me because I hadn't truly considered her as a future mother, just as my sister who required temporary assistance. I told her honestly that I didn't know because being a mother was different from being a guardian to your teenage brother, but that she appeared to care about doing right by her baby, which was more than she did for me. She nodded and said she'd been pondering that a lot and wondering if having her own child would help her comprehend how badly she failed me. Haley mentioned she'd been reading parenting books and taking online courses about infant care because she aimed to be ready this time instead of avoiding things when they became difficult. She stated Mark never wished to discuss parenting or baby preparations, and she now understood she should have viewed that as a warning sign about what type of father he would be. We don't speak about Mark often, but when his name arises, Haley no longer defends him or offers excuses for him. She refers to him as her ex-husband even though their divorce isn't final yet, and she calls the other woman his girlfriend without any resentment, simply stating facts. I believe she's truly over him emotionally, which is likely healthy. The baby has been moving quite a bit, and sometimes Haley will flinch or place her hand on her stomach, and I can observe the outline of tiny feet or hands pushing against her skin. It's odd to consider that in a few weeks there will be an entirely new individual in my apartment, who is technically my nephew or niece, even though I don't feel a bond with them yet. Haley inquired if I wished to feel the baby move, and I declined because that felt too personal and familial for our current stage and for rebuilding any relationship we might have. She appeared disappointed but didn't argue or attempt to persuade me, which I valued because honoring my boundaries is crucial if this is to succeed. Haley appears to grasp that I'm not ready to bond with her or act like we're close, and she doesn't press for heartfelt conversations or try to look back on our childhood. She keeps her attention on practical matters, such as doctor appointments, preparing for the baby, and finding a place to live after she recovers from giving birth. She's been applying for apartments, exploring childcare options, and looking into government assistance programs so she can provide for herself and the baby once she's ready to work again. I believe she's being realistic about her circumstances and not expecting me to support her indefinitely, which is good because I wouldn't do that anyway. The lease for this apartment is in my name, and I've worked hard to establish a stable life here, and I'm unwilling to jeopardize that by assuming long-term responsibility for Haley and her baby. I'm assisting her through this crisis because it's the right thing to do. But once the baby arrives and she recovers, she needs to determine her own path forward. I believe she knows that and accepts it, as she hasn't inquired about staying longer or implied that she hopes this will become permanent. She discusses her future plans as though they involve her and the baby finding their own place and creating their own life, which is what needs to happen. Next week, she has another doctor appointment, and the following week is her due date, so this temporary arrangement is almost finished. I'm curious to see how I'll feel once she actually leaves, and whether I'll miss her presence or simply be relieved to have my space back to myself. Final update. Haley gave birth 2 weeks ago, and they departed my apartment yesterday. I'm sitting here attempting to process everything that occurred and determine how I feel about it. All now that it's concluded. The baby is a girl, and Haley named her Daisy. She's healthy, beautiful, and perfect, just as all newborns ought to be. The birth occurred more quickly than anyone anticipated, and I ended up driving Haley to the hospital at 4 a.m. when her water broke and the contractions began coming very close together. She was frightened and in pain and kept apologizing for waking me up, as if I would be upset about missing sleep when she was literally in labor with my niece. I remained at the hospital while Haley was in delivery because she had no one else there. And even though we're not close, I couldn't abandon her to go through that alone. The nurses initially assumed I was the baby's father, and I had to clarify that I was the uncle and the father was not present, which resulted in some awkward conversations. Daisy was born after approximately 8 hours of labor, and when the nurse handed her to Haley, I observed something shift in my sister's face, as if she were looking at the most important thing in the world. Haley began weeping and speaking to the baby, vowing she would never desert her or allow anyone to harm her, and I had to leave the room because it was overwhelming for me to bear. The initial days after their return from the hospital were demanding, because infants require continuous care, and Haley was still recuperating from childbirth. I assisted where possible with tasks such as preparing food and doing laundry, but primarily I simply tried to remain unobtrusive, while Haley learned how to be a parent. She was adept with Daisy from the outset, like she had innate instincts for caring for her infant. Haley has matured over the past 6 years, but watching her with Daisy led me to consider she might indeed be a competent mother. Haley received approval for an apartment in a subsidized residential complex that permits children and has on-site childcare amenities, which seems like a favorable arrangement for a single mother beginning anew. The dwelling is modest, but it's clean, secure, and economical, and Haley appeared enthusiastic about having her own residence once more, even though it's nothing akin to the home she shared with Mark. She's been granted WIC, food stamps, and interim aid while she recuperates from giving birth, and then she'll require employment, but she has a few months to resolve that. Haley appears confident she can manage it, and I believe her because she's been ingenious and resolute throughout this entire ordeal. The day before they departed, Haley inquired if she could speak with me about something significant, and I agreed because we hadn't engaged in any serious discussions since Daisy's birth. She thanked me for assisting her when I wasn't obligated to and stated she understood I didn't do it for her, but for the baby, and she respected that. Haley mentioned she wanted me to realize that having Daisy made her comprehend how mistaken she was to abandon me 6 years prior, as she now couldn't conceive of choosing anyone or anything over safeguarding her child. She expressed that she finally grasped the meaning of family responsibility and how poorly she had performed it when I required her. She inquired if there was any possibility we could attempt to forge some sort of relationship moving ahead, not as the siblings we once were, but as the adults we are presently. Haley stated she didn't anticipate me to forgive or trust her, but she hoped we could at least maintain contact so Daisy could get to know her uncle if I was prepared to be a part of her life. I informed Haley that I wasn't prepared to make any commitments regarding our relationship, because I still had much anger and pain to process, but I was willing to observe how things unfolded. I mentioned I might be keen on getting acquainted with Daisy as she matured, but that any connection between Haley and me would need to be established gradually and with many boundaries. Haley replied that she understood and was thankful for whatever I was prepared to offer, even if it wasn't extensive. She stated she was going to focus on being a good mother to Daisy and building a stable life for them, and she hoped that eventually I might see that she'd changed and become someone worth having in my life again. After their departure, I tidied my apartment and placed away the baby things Haley had accumulated over the past few weeks. And it felt odd to have my space back to myself after getting used to their presence. I thought I'd feel relieved, but instead I felt rather empty, like something was missing even though I had wanted them to leave. I keep thinking about Daisy and wondering what sort of life she'll have with Haley, as a single mother trying to rebuild from nothing. I hope Haley keeps her promise to be a better parent than she was a sister, because Daisy deserves to have at least one person in her family who won't abandon her when things get tough. I'm not planning to update this post again unless something major happens, because I think this chapter of my life is largely closed now. Haley and Daisy have their own lives to build, and I have mine to continue living, and that feels like the right outcome for everyone involved. Thanks to everyone who commented and shared their own stories and gave me advice when I was trying to figure out what to do. It helped to know that other people understood why this situation was so tough for me, and that I wasn't wrong to feel conflicted about helping someone who had hurt me so badly. I still don't know if I made the right choice, but I know I made a choice I can live with, and that's probably the best any of us can do when we're dealing with complicated family situations that don't have clear right and wrong answers. Time for another story you won't believe. I'll try to explain this without totally losing it, but I can't promise anything. My parents divorced when I was 8, and my dad married Amy again when I was 12. Amy had a daughter, Ezra, who was 10 then, and right from the start, it was obvious Ezra was Amy's cherished little princess, while I was simply the kid who came with the whole package. My dad didn't seem to notice, though, because he was so occupied trying to please Amy and be the ideal stepdad to Ezra that he somewhat forgot he already had a daughter. I won't sit here and pretend I was the easiest kid to deal with, as the divorce was tough on me, and I misbehaved sometimes. But I was 12, and my world had been flipped upside down. Suddenly I needed to share my dad with 2 new people who made it quite obvious I was the outsider. Amy never said anything directly cruel to me, but she had a knack for making comments that sounded pleasant initially but were actually sharp. For instance, she'd say things like, "Oh, Ezra is so naturally graceful. Some girls just have it, and some girls have to work harder," when I was struggling with things, or "Ezra has such a gentle spirit. She never raises her voice or gets upset like some children do," whenever I became frustrated about something. And my dad just allowed it, because he was so focused on making Amy happy that he didn't want to upset things by defending me. Whenever I tried to talk to him about how Amy and Ezra treated me, he'd say I was being too sensitive, or that I needed to try harder to be part of the family. It made me feel like I was going crazy because I could see what was happening, but no one else would acknowledge it. Ezra got everything she wanted, and I got the leftovers. When we went on family vacations, Amy would plan activities that Ezra. As we grew older, it became clearer that we were simply 2 individuals who occasionally shared the same home. She enjoyed all the feminine things like makeup, shopping, and cheerleading, while I was more of a tomboy who preferred sports, being outside, and reading. That was perfectly acceptable, as not everyone needs to be best friends with their step-siblings, but Amy made it seem like it was somehow my fault we weren't closer. When Ezra finished high school, Amy hosted this massive party for her and invited everyone they knew. My dad delivered a speech about how proud he was of Ezra and how she would achieve incredible things in college. I recall sitting there contemplating how when I graduated, he took me to dinner at Applebee's, and that was the extent of it. I convinced myself it didn't matter, as I didn't need a huge party anyway, and I was attending college on a scholarship, so I was managing well by myself. Yet it still pained me. College was actually beneficial for me because I gained some separation from all the family drama, and I could simply concentrate on my own life without continually feeling like I was vying for my dad's attention. I formed genuine friendships with people who truly liked me for myself. I participated in activities I valued, and I began to feel like perhaps I was worth something after all. I still spoke with my dad often and visited during breaks, but I wasn't living there full time anymore, so the dynamic had changed. Ezra also went to college, but she found it hard being away from home and ultimately transferred to a school nearer home after her first year because she missed her mom too much. Amy behaved as if this was entirely normal and healthy, and my dad fully backed the decision. I recall thinking that if I had wanted to switch schools because I was homesick, they would have told me to be tougher and endure it. Following college, I moved to a new city for work, and I created a life for myself that I felt proud of. I had a job I enjoyed, close friends, and eventually I met Nomad, who is now my fiancé, and honestly the best thing that has ever happened to me. Nomad understands me in a way I don't believe anyone in my family ever has, and he makes me feel sufficient just as I am, which might sound cliché, but it's accurate. When Nomad and I became engaged, I was so thrilled and eager to begin planning our wedding, and I called my dad immediately to share the news. He appeared happy for me and uttered all the correct sentiments about how he couldn't wait to meet Nomad and was excited to escort me down the aisle. For a moment, I felt as though perhaps we could have the father-daughter bond I'd always desired. But then Ezra got engaged 6 months later, and all of a sudden it was as if my wedding no longer mattered. Each talk with my father became updates on Ezra's wedding plans, how Amy was assisting her in arranging this grand event, and how they were considering locations that cost more than my whole wedding budget. I attempted to feel happy for Ezra, since tying the knot is meant to be thrilling. Yet it was tough not to observe that my father appeared far more involved in her wedding than he was in mine. Ezra's marriage took place last autumn, and it was everything Amy had envisioned. My father escorted Ezra down the aisle and delivered another one of his speeches, speaking of how proud he felt, how lovely she appeared, and how fortunate her new husband was. I sat there observing, trying to be pleased for them, but also experiencing this unsettling jealousy, as I understood my own wedding wouldn't resemble that at all. Not that I desired the identical type of wedding, because Nomad and I are more understated individuals, and we're covering most of the costs ourselves, so we're opting for something smaller and more personal. However, it would have been pleasant to sense that my father was even half as thrilled about my important day as he was about Ezra's. I kept assuring myself that it wasn't important, because the main thing was marrying Nomad and beginning our life together, not having some elaborate celebration. So we scheduled our wedding for this spring. I began arranging everything, and my dad mentioned he was anticipating it and that he couldn't wait to walk me down the aisle. I began to feel excited, thinking perhaps this would be our special time, you know? Like maybe escorting me down the aisle would hold significance for him, and he'd recognize that I was also his daughter, and that our bond was important. But then 2 months ago, things completely unraveled. I still struggle to grasp what occurred, because it was far more dreadful than anything I could have pictured. I phoned my father to discuss a few wedding arrangements, and to verify his intention to escort me down the aisle. He remained silent on the phone for an extended period, which ought to have been my initial indication that something was amiss. Eventually, he stated he needed to speak with me about an issue, that it was complex and he wasn't sure how to express it. I was sitting there contemplating perhaps he was concerned about finances or experiencing health issues or something equally grave. However, he then informed me that Amy wished for him not to attend my wedding whatsoever, and that she had threatened to depart from him if he appeared. I truly couldn't comprehend his words initially, as it was utterly unbelievable. I requested that he reiterate it, and he explained that Amy felt my having a wedding so soon after Ezra's amounted to attempting to overshadow Ezra's moment, and that it was disrespectful to their household. I thought, what on earth does that even signify? Ezra wed 6 months prior, had her large, elaborate wedding, and now I'm prohibited from marrying because it might somehow lessen her special day, which has already occurred. But things worsened, because then my dad mentioned that Amy also felt I was being manipulative by asking him to walk me down the aisle, since I was trying to make him pick between his families and putting him in an impossible spot. I snapped at that point because I simply couldn't believe what I was hearing. I mean, I'm his actual biological daughter, and asking my father to walk me down the aisle at my wedding is somehow manipulative. I told him that was totally insane, that Amy was being absurd and controlling, and that he needed to stand up to her and tell her he was going to his daughter's wedding, whether she liked it or not. He became defensive and said I didn't grasp how tough this was for him, that Amy was just trying to protect her daughter, and that maybe we could work out a compromise. A compromise? Like, what exactly was the compromise supposed to be? That he would come to my wedding but not walk me down the aisle? That he would walk me halfway down the aisle and then leave? That I should postpone my wedding for another year so it wouldn't be too close to Ezra's? I couldn't believe he was even suggesting there was room for negotiation here. And then he said the thing that really broke my heart, that he hoped I would understand that his marriage to Amy was important to him, and that he couldn't risk losing her over this. He was essentially conveying to me that his wife held more significance to him than his daughter, and that he was selecting her over me, without even attempting to contend for our connection. I ended the call with him because I was so furious and wounded that I couldn't even articulate words. I spent the remainder of the day weeping and endeavoring to determine what I was meant to do. Nomad was wonderful and simply embraced me as I broke down, assuring me that we'd resolve it jointly, and that regardless of what transpired with my father, our wedding would still be flawless, because we'd be uniting in marriage. Yet I couldn't cease contemplating how my dad had escorted Ezra down the aisle merely half a year prior, how proud he had appeared, and how he delivered that address about her importance to him. Now he was informing me that he couldn't even attend my wedding because his spouse didn't wish for him to be present. I understood that this wasn't truly about Amy whatsoever. This was about the reality that my father had never genuinely contended for me, selected me, or made me feel as significant as his new household. I phoned him back the following day. I was more composed, but I was also finished feigning that this was acceptable. I informed him that if he opted not to attend my wedding, then he was choosing to terminate our relationship indefinitely, and that I wouldn't continue imploring him to be my father. He began weeping and stating that he loved me, and that this was devastating him, but that he didn't know what else to do. I informed him that he knew precisely what to do. He simply didn't wish to do it because it would be difficult. He kept saying he hoped I would eventually understand, that he never intended things to be this way, and that perhaps, after some time, we could resolve matters. I told him there would be no working things out, as I was finished being the daughter who received the leftovers, who had to vie for bits of attention, and who was always expected to be understanding when he chose others over me. I informed him that he had made his choice. Now he had to accept it, and that following my wedding, I no longer wanted him to contact me. He pleaded with me not to do this, stating that I was being overly extreme, and that removing him from my life wouldn't resolve anything. But I was beyond caring about his feelings, as he clearly hadn't cared about mine for years. The worst part is that I believe some part of me always knew this day would arrive, because he'd been revealing his true self for years, and I simply kept hoping he would change. But when he escorted Ezra down the aisle and then told me he couldn't do likewise for me, it was like the ultimate proof that I had never been as important to him as I wished to believe. So I informed all my wedding vendors that there would be no father-daughter dance, no one accompanying me down the aisle, and that it would simply be me walking myself down to marry the man I love. Honestly, once I made that choice, I felt this huge weight lift off my shoulders because I realized I didn't need my dad's approval or presence for a perfect wedding day. Nomad's dad offered to walk me down the aisle, and that was very kind, but I chose to walk by myself. My mom has been exceptionally supportive throughout this whole situation. She's assisting me with the final wedding preparations, and she told me she's proud of me for asserting myself and not letting my dad make me feel unimportant. She also mentioned she's not surprised this occurred because my dad has always been a people pleaser who goes along with whatever makes his life simpler, even if it means hurting the people he's supposed to love most. The wedding is in 3 weeks, and I'm genuinely excited about marrying Nomad and starting our life together. But I'd be dishonest if I said I wasn't still hurt and angry about the entire circumstance with my dad. A few of my relatives have been calling and sending messages, trying to get me to reconcile with my dad before the wedding. They repeatedly state that family is family, and that I'll regret his absence. But I don't believe they comprehend that he ceased being family to me the moment he prioritized Amy's feelings above his own daughter's wedding. I'm tired of everyone acting like I should be the bigger person and forgive him when he's the one who brought about this entire circumstance. What truly bothers me is that he keeps sending me these lengthy messages about how much he loves me, how remorseful he is, and how he never wished for things to unfold like this. Yet he still hasn't mentioned that he's reconsidered attending the wedding. It's as if he wants me to forgive him and sustain a relationship with him, but he's unwilling to actually behave any differently. I cannot continue to accept apologies that aren't accompanied by altered behavior. I blocked his number last week because I grew weary of receiving his messages and having them spoil my day. I understand that likely appears cold, but I need to concentrate on my wedding and my future with Nomad instead of perpetually being pulled back into drama with my dad. Honestly, the quiet has been rather peaceful because I'm not continually waiting for him to text me or pondering if he's going to alter his decision at the last moment. My bridal shower's this weekend. My mom is hosting it for me. All my friends are attending, and Nomad's mom and sisters will be there as well. I'm genuinely looking forward to it because it's going to be filled with people who truly love me and wish to celebrate with me. So I suppose what I'm asking is whether I'm being overly harsh by permanently cutting my dad out of my life over this. Because some days I feel entirely confident in my decision, and other days I ponder if I'm discarding a relationship that could perhaps be mended someday. Ida for telling my dad he's dead to me and permanently cutting him out of my life because he chose my stepfamily over walking me down the aisle at my wedding. Update 1. I can't believe I'm back here already, but so much has occurred since my initial post, and I need to get this out of my head because I'm honestly losing my mind right now. Thank you to everyone who commented on my original post and told me I wasn't crazy for being upset about this situation. It truly helped me feel less alone. So my wedding was last weekend, and it was absolutely perfect, even though the days leading up to it were completely insane, and I'm still processing everything that occurred. I thought I was finished with my dad drama, but apparently the universe had other plans for me. The bridal shower 2 weeks ago was amazing and exactly what I needed. Just me and all the women in my life who actually love and support me, having a wonderful time and celebrating. My mom was so happy, and Nomad's family has basically adopted me as their own, which makes me feel truly good about the family I'm marrying into. No drama, no stress, just pure joy and excitement about the wedding. But then last Monday, precisely 1 week before my wedding, my phone started ringing at around 7 in the morning. It was my dad calling from a number I didn't recognize because I had blocked his usual number. He informed me that he had left Amy, that he was staying at a hotel, and that he wished to come to my wedding and walk me down the aisle after all. I'm standing there in my kitchen in my pajamas, trying to process this information because it was truly the last thing I expected to hear. I asked him what occurred and why he changed his mind. Apparently, Amy had been growing more and more difficult about the whole wedding situation. She continually made remarks about how selfish I was being and how I was attempting to ruin Ezra's marriage by having my wedding so soon after hers, which makes absolutely no sense. But whatever. Then she began saying that if my dad truly loved her and Ezra, he would pick them over me permanently and cut me out of his life completely. She told him he needed to call me, tell me that he never wanted to see me again, that I wasn't welcome in their house anymore, and that he was choosing his real family over me. Apparently, that was finally the line in the sand for my dad, because he realized that Amy wasn't just asking him to miss my wedding. She was asking him to destroy his relationship with me forever. He said he told Amy he couldn't do that I was his daughter no matter what, and that he needed to find a way to be at my wedding. She completely lost it and began screaming at him that he was choosing me over her, and that she was done being married to someone who didn't put his wife first. Then she told him to leave the house, and that she was filing for divorce. A part of me was glad he finally stood up for me, but I was also very confused because this was just 6 days before my wedding, and I had already accepted walking myself down the aisle in his absence. I mentioned that to him, and he started weeping more intensely, pleading with me to let him come to the wedding and saying that he knew he had made a mistake, but that he wanted to correct it. I didn't know what to say because I had spent weeks getting myself ready emotionally for him not to be there. And now, all of a sudden, he wished to appear at the last moment, after I had already mourned the absence of my dad at my wedding. I was upset because it seemed like he was only selecting me now because Amy had made it unfeasible for him to choose both, not because he truly understood that I should have been his priority from the start. I told him I required time to consider it, and that I would ring him back. Then I spent the next few hours discussing with Nomad and my mom what I ought to do. Nomad said it was entirely my choice, and that he would back whatever I decided. My mom said that she believed I should be cautious about letting my dad back in, only for him to hurt me once more if things didn't resolve with Amy. But then I spoke with my therapist, whom I had begun seeing after all this turmoil started, and she assisted me in considering what I truly desired versus what I felt I ought to desire. I understood that despite all that had occurred, I did still wish for my dad at my wedding if he was truly opting to be there, because he cared for me, and not solely because his alternative had been removed. So I rang him back and informed him that he could attend the wedding, but that we required a significant discussion about our bond and what had brought us to this stage. He consented to meet me for coffee the following day to discuss everything thoroughly. The discussion was quite difficult because I had to convey to him how deeply he had wounded me through the years, and how his preference for Amy and Ezra over me had harmed our connection long before the wedding turmoil began. He listened, wept, and confessed that he had let me down as a father, and that he had been so concentrated on attempting to make his new marriage succeed that he had overlooked his bond with me. He stated that he comprehended when Amy requested him to remove me from his life entirely, that he had already forfeited so much time with me, and that he could not tolerate the idea of losing me permanently. He apologized for not defending me earlier, and for causing me to feel like I wasn't as significant as Ezra and Amy. It wasn't an ideal discussion, and I don't believe a single conversation can reverse years of pain and letdown. However, it felt like the first time in a long while that my dad was truly recognizing me and admitting how his deeds had impacted me. I concluded that I desired him at my wedding because, regardless of everything, he's still my father, and I love him. So he walked me down the aisle last Saturday, and it was emotional, complicated, and perfect, all at once. I felt anxious right up until the moment it happened, because I was concerned he might change his mind again. But he was there. He appeared proud and happy, and he told me he loved me before he gave me away to Nomad. The wedding itself was everything I had dreamed it would be, and more. Nomad looked so handsome. The weather was perfect. All our friends and family were there celebrating with us, and for the first time in months, I felt entirely happy and peaceful. We danced, laughed, ate cake, and I felt like the most fortunate woman in the world. My dad delivered a brief speech during the reception. He spoke about how proud he was of the woman I'd become, and how regretful he was that it had taken him so long to realize what was most important in life. He said that he was thankful I had given him another chance to be the father I deserved, and that he was dedicated to rebuilding our relationship. It wasn't the same as if none of this drama had ever occurred, because I think there will always be a part of me that remembers how he almost chose Amy over me. But it felt like perhaps we could start fresh and build something better together. But then yesterday, I learned that Amy and Ezra have been telling everyone in their family and friend group that I broke up my dad's marriage and that I'm a selfish, manipulative person who couldn't stand that Ezra had a beautiful wedding, so I had to ruin her family to make myself feel better. Apparently, they're claiming that I gave my dad an ultimatum, made him choose between me and Amy, and that I'm why their marriage dissolved. I'm so furious I can hardly see straight, because that's not what happened in the slightest. They're portraying me as the villain when Amy was the one who demanded that my dad remove me from his life permanently. Now I'm concerned that others in my extended family will believe their version of events and think that I'm some sort of homewrecker who ruined a marriage. My dad phoned me when he learned what they were saying. He was furious and said he would set the record straight with everyone. But I told him not to bother because I don't want to get involved in she said, situation with Amy and Ezra. I simply want to focus on my new marriage, building a life with Nomad, and not get pulled into more drama. But it's difficult not to feel hurt and frustrated that even after everything, Amy and Ezra are still trying to make me the bad guy and paint themselves as the victims in this situation. I keep wondering if my dad will stick by his decision to choose me when Amy and Ezra are putting pressure on our extended family to take sides. Nomad believes I should just focus on our marriage and not worry about what Amy and Ezra are saying, because the people who matter know the truth, and the people who don't know me well enough to see through their lies aren't worth worrying about. I suppose he's likely correct, but it's still tough to realize that people might think badly of me based on things that aren't true. Anyway, I'm married now, and that's what's most important. But I wish to update you all on how things unfolded, because so many of you were engaged in my story and offered such helpful counsel. Update 2, I wasn't intending to share another update, but matters have become so much stranger and more complex since my last post that I feel compelled to share what's transpired because I honestly don't know if I'm managing this situation properly anymore. Thus, roughly 6 weeks have passed since my wedding, and Nomad and I have been relishing married life and attempting to adjust to our new normal together. My dad and I have been gradually striving to mend our relationship, and it's been progressing better than I anticipated. For instance, we've been speaking on the phone consistently, and he's been trying to be more attentive and helpful. However, last week I received a text from Ezra inquiring if we could meet for coffee to chat. I was so stunned that I literally gazed at my phone for about 10 minutes, trying to determine if I was imagining things. Ezra and I haven't communicated since prior to my wedding, and I honestly believed I would never hear from her again after all the turmoil with Amy and my dad. I showed Nomad the message, and he thought it might be some sort of snare or that Ezra was going to attempt to manipulate me in some way. However, I was curious about what she wished to convey, so I consented to meet her close to my home. I'm pleased I did because what she informed me entirely altered my perception of everything that had occurred. Ezra appeared awful when I met her. She began by apologizing for how her mother had treated me throughout the years and for the wedding circumstances, which was absolutely not what I was anticipating to hear from her. Then she informed me that her mother had been lying to both me and my dad about what the other individual was saying and doing, and that Amy had been manipulating the circumstances to attempt to create a lasting rift between me and my dad. Evidently, Amy had told Ezra that I had been uttering dreadful things about their family, and that I was attempting to turn my dad against them, which was not true in the slightest. But here's the truly disturbing part that I'm still trying to comprehend. Ezra stated that Amy had been intending to divorce my dad regardless, because she had been having an affair with a man from her workplace for over a year, and that she was utilizing the wedding drama as a pretext to terminate the marriage without needing to confess to infidelity. As per Ezra, Amy had been seeking a reason to portray my dad as the villain so that she could depart from him and claim half of everything without people discovering that she was the one who had ruined the marriage by engaging in an affair. When I revealed my engagement, she recognized a chance to engineer a scenario where my dad would be forced to pick between his families. And regardless of his choice, she could use it as a reason to terminate their marriage. Ezra mentioned that if my dad had opted not to attend my wedding, Amy would have informed everyone that he was a dreadful father who deserted his daughter. When he opted to attend my wedding instead, she got to portray herself as the victim and state that he picked me over his wife. Regardless, Amy managed to be the wronged party instead of the unfaithful spouse. I felt nauseated hearing all of this because it implied that Amy had been manipulating my relationship with my dad for months and employing my wedding as a tool in her scheme to depart from him. Ezra stated that she had only just learned about the affair and about Amy's deceit when she overheard her mom on the phone with the other man discussing how flawlessly everything had unfolded. Ezra was weeping as she recounted all of this to me, and she mentioned that she felt awful for not realizing what her mom was doing and for not defending me throughout the years when Amy was treating me poorly. She stated that she had always been aware her mom disliked me, but she believed it was merely typical step-family tension. And then Ezra said something that truly resonated with me, specifically that she had always been envious of my relationship with my dad because, even though Amy endeavored to make him prefer Ezra, she could perceive that he loved me in a distinct manner as I was his biological daughter. She mentioned that Amy had been envious of that as well, which is why she had striven so diligently to create a division between us. I had no words for any of this, as I felt so angry, hurt, and confused, like I had spent months and years blaming myself for not being good enough to earn my dad's love and attention, yet all along Amy had been actively working to destroy our relationship. I also felt bad for Ezra, as she was discovering that her mom wasn't the person she thought she was. Ezra asked if I could forgive her for not speaking up sooner and for believing her mom's lies about me. She mentioned that she wanted to try to have a real relationship with me now that we both knew the truth. Honestly, I'm unsure how I feel about that, because Ezra and I have never been close, and I'm not certain if we can build something from nothing, but I do appreciate that she came forward with the truth. I told my dad everything Ezra had told me, and he was devastated because he realized that Amy had been manipulating him for years and using me as a pawn in her game. He said that so many things made sense now, like why Amy would get upset whenever he spent time with me, and why she always seemed to have a crisis whenever I had something important happening in my life. My dad has filed for divorce, and he's trying to protect his assets from Amy since she was the one who cheated and destroyed the marriage. But apparently she's claiming that he abandoned the marriage when he chose to come to my wedding. It's all very messy and complicated legal stuff that I don't fully understand, but essentially Amy is still trying to make herself the victim, even though she's the one having an affair. This entire situation has made me realize that I was right to be angry about how I was treated over the years, but that I was blaming the wrong person for some of it. My dad certainly should have stood up for me more, and he should have seen what Amy was doing, but she was actively working to manipulate both of us and drive us apart. I'm trying to figure out how to move forward with my relationship with my dad because, on the one hand, I'm glad we're rebuilding our connection. But on the other hand, I'm still hurt that he allowed Amy to manipulate him for so long and that he almost chose her over me. I feel like I need time to process all this new information before I can decide how much I want him involved in my life going forward. Nomad has been amazing through all of this. He keeps reminding me that I don't have to make any big decisions right now about my relationships with my dad or Ezra, and that I can take as much time as I need to figure out what I want. My therapist has been helpful too in helping me work through all the complicated emotions I'm having about this whole mess. I suppose what I'm wondering now is whether I should give my dad and Ezra more of a chance, now that I know Amy was manipulating the situation, or if the damage done over the years is too great to overcome, regardless of who was truly to blame. So I suppose I'm seeking advice again about whether I should be more open to rebuilding these relationships now that I know the truth about what was truly happening, or if I should be more cautious about letting people back into my life who hurt me, even if they were also being manipulated. Anyway, I wanted to share this update because the situation has shifted so dramatically since my original post, and I know some of you were invested in what occurred. If anyone has advice on how to navigate rebuilding relationships with people who hurt you, but were also being manipulated themselves, I would truly appreciate hearing your thoughts. Thanks for reading these lengthy updates and for all the support you've given me through this whole crazy journey. It means more than you know to have people who understand what I'm going through and who don't think I'm crazy for being confused about how to handle all this. If you thought that was crazy, listen to this. I'm 22, and yes, I dropped out of college 2 years ago because I couldn't afford it anymore. Honestly, the debt was killing me, and I wasn't even sure what I wanted to do with my life regardless. I work at a grocery store at present, and it's not glamorous. But it pays the bills, and I have health insurance, which was vital when I got pregnant. The baby's father isn't around, and that's fine by me, because he was a piece of shit regardless, and I'm better off without him. When I learned I was pregnant, I was afraid, but also oddly excited because I've always wanted to be a mom. I know that sounds foolish when you're 22 and working retail, but I've been fending for myself since I was 16, when my parents died in a car accident, and I moved in with my Aunt Fiona, who is my dad's sister. She took me in, and I'm thankful for that, but she's always made it clear that she believes I'm a disappointment and that I should have done better with my life. The thing is, Fiona has this daughter Penny, who is 28 and married to this fellow Owen, and they've been trying to have kids for about 5 years now, and it's just not happening for them. They've gone through fertility treatments and IVF and all that expensive stuff, and nothing has worked, and Penny is practically obsessed with having a baby. I feel for her, I truly do, because I can see how much it hurts her, but that doesn't mean I should feel guilty for getting pregnant when she can't. Well, anyway, when I told Fiona I was pregnant, she was unhappy about it and repeatedly asked me what I intended to do, proposing that perhaps I should think about adoption, since how could I raise a baby alone with no education and no genuine job? I informed her I was keeping my baby, and that was final, but she continued raising the topic every few weeks, as if she hoped I'd reconsider. Then, when I was around 6 months pregnant, Penny visited Fiona's house while I was present, and she began crying and discussing how unjust it was that some individuals can simply conceive without even trying, while she's been doing everything correctly, adhering to all the rules, and spending thousands of dollars, yet still nothing. I felt incredibly awkward sitting there listening to this, but I remained silent, since what could I possibly say? However, then Penny looked directly at me and stated that perhaps this was destined, and that perhaps God intended for her to raise my baby, because she could provide him with everything he deserved, and I could return to school and reclaim my life. I simply stared at her, as I couldn't believe she was serious. And then Fiona interjected, saying that Penny had a valid point, and that I should genuinely consider what was best for the baby. I informed them both that I was not giving up my baby, and that this discussion was concluded. But Penny began crying more intensely, stating that it was not fair that she would be such a good mom, and that I was acting selfishly. Fiona told me to consider it and not make any rash choices, but I stated there was nothing to consider because this baby was mine, and I was keeping him. Afterward, things grew quite tense in the house, and Fiona kept offering small remarks about how difficult it would be for me, and how babies were costly, and how I would manage to afford daycare and such. She wasn't incorrect that it would be challenging, but she conveyed it in a manner that made it evident she believed I was making a grave error. Penny began visiting more frequently, bringing baby clothes and toys, and discussing how thrilled she was to be an aunt, and how she simply wished to assist. But it felt strange and controlling, as if she were plotting something. She would inquire about my birth plan and whether I had chosen a pediatrician, and offered to aid with research, and I repeatedly stated I had it managed. But she wouldn't let it go. The most unsettling aspect was when she questioned if I had considered what might occur if something went amiss during delivery, and who would care for the baby if I were unable to. I informed her that was utterly morbid, and I was not discussing it. She claimed she was merely concerned about me and the baby, and wished to ensure we were both looked after, but it felt as though she was hoping something would befall me so she could intervene and take my child. Consequently, my son was born 3 weeks ago, and the delivery proceeded smoothly, and he's healthy and flawless, and I love him more than I ever imagined possible. The first few days were tough because I was tired and sore and figuring out breastfeeding, but my neighbor helped out a lot and brought me meals, and things were going okay. Fiona came to see the baby the day after I got home from the hospital, and she held him for about an hour, constantly saying how beautiful he was and how he looked just like Penny when she was a baby, which was odd because Penny and I aren't even directly related. Then she asked me again if I had genuinely thought about what I was doing, and if I was certain I could handle being a single mom. I told her I was sure, and that I needed her to stop questioning my choices because I was his mother, and that was final. She said she was just looking out for me, but I could tell she was still hoping I'd change my mind. Penny came over the next day with Owen, and they brought this huge gift basket full of costly baby items, and Penny kept asking to hold him, taking pictures, and talking about how she was going to spoil him rotten as his aunt. Owen seemed uneasy with how intense she was being, but he didn't say anything. Then Penny asked me if I had thought any more about our conversation, and I said, "What conversation?" And she said, "About letting her and Owen adopt the baby." I told her I thought we had settled this months ago and that I wasn't giving up my son, and she started crying again, saying I was being cruel, and that she would love him so much and give him opportunities that I never could. I got really angry then and told her she needed to leave my house and stop asking me about my baby, because he wasn't hers and never would be. She said I was being selfish and that I didn't understand what it was like to want something so badly and not be able to have it, and I said that didn't give her the right to my child. Fiona jumped in and said Penny was just emotional and that I should be more understanding, but I said I was done being understanding and that they both needed to accept that this baby was mine and stop trying to guilt me into giving him away. Penny left crying, and Owen followed her, and Fiona stayed behind to tell me I was breaking her daughter's heart, and that the least I could do was consider what was best for everyone involved. I told her the only person I needed to consider was my son, and that what was best for him was staying with his mother, who loved him. She said love wasn't enough, and that Penny and Owen could give him stability and a real family and college funds and all the things that I couldn't provide. I said that I was his true family and that I would figure out the rest, and that this discussion was over. Things were calm for about a week after that, and I thought perhaps they had finally gotten the message. But then last Monday, I was at home with the baby when there was a knock on my door, and it was a social worker from Child Protective Services, saying they had received a report that I was using drugs and planning to harm my baby. I felt like I was going to throw up, because I have never used drugs in my life, and the idea that someone would say I was planning to hurt my son made me physically ill. The social worker was actually very nice and professional, and she explained that they had to investigate all reports, but that she could tell right away that the accusations were likely false, because I was clearly taking good care of the baby, and he was healthy and well fed. She still had to conduct a full investigation, though, so she looked around my apartment and asked me a bunch of questions, and had me take a drug test, which came back clean, obviously. She said that whoever filed the report claimed that I had been seen using drugs, and had told someone that I regretted having the baby, and wished he would just disappear. I knew right away that it had to be Fiona or Penny who made the report, because they were the only ones who had been pressuring me about the baby, and they were probably hoping that CPS would take him away so Penny could adopt him. The social worker said that false reports were regrettably common in custody disputes and family situations, and that she could tell this was likely one of those instances. The investigation took 3 days, and it was the most dreadful 3 days of my life because I was terrified they might take my baby from me, despite knowing I'd done nothing wrong. I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep, and I simply held him, cried, and promised him that I would never let anyone take him from me. Eventually, the social worker called to say that the case was being closed because there was no proof of any wrongdoing, and that the report seemed false. I knew it was Fiona, but I couldn't prove it, so I chose to cut them off entirely. I packed up all the baby items Penny had bought and dropped them off at Fiona's house with a note stating that I didn't want them in my life anymore, and that they weren't welcome near my baby. Fiona called me that night, screaming about how I was being dramatic, and that she was just trying to help, and that I was making a major mistake. I told her I knew she or Penny had called CPS, and that what they did was unforgivable, and could have ruined my life and taken my baby from me. She denied it at first, but then she said maybe someone was just concerned about my ability to care for a baby, and that if I had nothing to hide, then I shouldn't be upset about the investigation. I said that making false accusations to CPS was illegal, and that I never wanted to see her again. She began crying then, saying that I was all the family she had left after my parents died, and that she loved me and just wanted what was best for everyone. I told her that if she loved me, she wouldn't have tried to destroy my life and take my child away, and that what she did was evil, and I would never forgive her. Penny then got on the phone and began screaming at me that I was ruining her life, and that I was a selfish bitch who didn't deserve to have a baby when she couldn't. She said that she would be a better mother than me, and that my son would be better off with her and Owen, and that I was going to mess up his life because I was too young, stupid, and poor to raise him properly. I completely lost it then and began yelling back that she was a psychotic, baby-stealing lunatic, and that if she ever came near me or my son again, I would call the police and get a restraining order. I said that just because she couldn't have kids didn't mean she could steal mine, and that she needed serious mental help. Fiona got back on the phone and told me I was out of line and that Penny was just hurting and that I should apologize, but I hung up on her and blocked both of their numbers. It's been a week since then, and I keep getting messages from other family members saying that I'm being too harsh, and that Fiona and Penny are family, and that I should forgive them and work things out. They say that Penny is devastated, and that Fiona is heartbroken, and that I'm tearing the family apart due to a misunderstanding. Yet, I don't believe it was a misunderstanding whatsoever. I believe they contacted CPS, hoping my infant would be removed so Penny might adopt him, and I find that sick, twisted, and unforgivable. I love my son above all else in the world, and I would do anything to shield him. Currently, that involves keeping him distant from those who believe they have a claim to him simply because they desire him. I know I'm young and lack much money, but I love him, and I am a good mother, and that ought to suffice. Fiona repeatedly says I'm making an error and will regret severing ties with my family. But I believe my sole mistake was trusting them initially and failing to see the lengths they'd go to achieve their desires. I suppose what I'm asking is, am I the asshole for declining to forgive them and cutting them off entirely? Or am I justified in shielding my son from those who attempted to have him removed from me? I feel like I'm losing my mind because certain family members are telling me conflicting things, and I no longer know what to believe. So, IDA? Update 1. I posted this a few days ago and received many responses, and I wish to update because certain events have occurred since then that make me even more certain I made the correct decision. Some individuals inquired about my neighbor who assisted me after the baby's birth, and yes, she's amazing. Her name is Sandra, and she's about 65. Her children are grown and have moved away, and she's been like a grandmother to my son. She was actually the one who suggested I document everything because she formerly worked in family law and understands how these situations can escalate. So anyway, yesterday morning, Sandra came by to check on us, as she does daily, and she appeared quite upset about something. She mentioned that a woman had been parked outside our apartment building for about an hour, just sitting in her vehicle and observing our windows, and that it made her uneasy. I looked outside, and sure enough, Penny's car was parked across the street, and I could see her seated in the driver's seat, simply staring at our building. I felt ill to my stomach, because I realized she had likely been watching us for who knows how long, and I hadn't even observed it. Sandra stated she was going to call the police if Penny didn't depart, but I said to let me try to handle it initially, so I went downstairs and walked toward her vehicle. When she noticed me approaching, she rolled down the window and began crying at once. She claimed she just wanted to see the baby, that she missed him, and that she was sorry about everything that occurred. I informed her that she needed to depart and that she was frightening me by sitting outside my home observing us, and she said she wasn't trying to frighten me. She simply wanted to converse. I said we had nothing to discuss and that she had to keep away from me and my son, otherwise I would contact the police and obtain a restraining order. She began weeping at that point, claiming she loved the baby and simply wished to be a part of his life, and that it wasn't just that I was able to be a mother when she couldn't. I felt sorry for her for about 2 seconds, yet then I recalled what she and Fiona had done, and I became angry once more. I told her that her infertility was not my concern, and that she couldn't simply have my baby because she desired one, and that she required help instead of pursuing me. She said she wasn't pursuing me and that she had every entitlement to be on a public road, but I said that sitting outside someone's residence observing them was certainly pursuing, and that if I saw her vehicle here again, I would contact the police at once. Then she said something that truly unnerved me. She said that I couldn't keep the infant from family indefinitely, and that he merited knowing his true family who could care for him appropriately. I said I was his real family, and she said that blood didn't constitute a family, and that she possessed more affection to offer him than I ever could. The way she said it was so unsettling and proprietorial, like she genuinely believed that my son somehow belonged to her. I told her she was delusional and required professional assistance, and then I departed while she was still weeping in her vehicle. She remained there for another 10 minutes before eventually driving off, but I was unsettled by it for the remainder of the day. Sandra mentioned I should absolutely file a police report simply to have it documented in case she returns, and I believe she's correct. Then last night, I received a call from my uncle Terry, who is also my father's brother, and he stated that Fiona had requested him to contact me to attempt to resolve matters. He mentioned that he comprehended I was upset, but that family held significance, and that I ought to endeavor to forgive and proceed. I informed him what had transpired with the CPS report and Penny pursuing me, and he became silent for a moment. Then he stated that he wasn't aware of those matters, and that Fiona had informed him it was merely a dispute regarding the baby's future. I said it wasn't a dispute. It was them attempting to abduct my child and making untrue accusations to the government, and that there was no recovery from that. He stated he would speak with Fiona and try to convince her to desist, but that I should contemplate family counseling to address the problems. I informed him there were no problems to resolve, because I was finished with Fiona and Penny indefinitely, and that anyone who sided with them could also keep their distance from me. He appeared astonished by my steadfastness, and commented that I was severing connections that I might require someday. I told him I'd prefer to have no family over family who would try to take my child from me, and that he could inform Fiona and Penny that if they got in touch with me again, or came close to my apartment, I would seek a restraining order and press harassment charges. After hanging up, I began to consider what he'd said about burning bridges, and wondered if I was going too far. But then I looked at my baby, recalled how scared I was when CPS appeared, and knew I was doing the right thing. Sandra helped me set up a security camera that faces the street so we can tell if Penny comes back, and she's going to keep watch during the day when I'm at work. My supervisor has been very understanding about me bringing the baby to work sometimes when I can't arrange childcare, and my colleagues have been supportive as well. I know some individuals believe I should try to reconcile with my family, but they don't grasp that these people attempted to have my child taken from me by lying to the government. That's not something one simply forgives and forgets. It's something that could have ruined my life and my son's life permanently. I'll keep protecting my baby no matter what anyone says, and if that means I must cut off toxic family members, then that's what I will do. My son deserves to grow up safe and loved, not continually under threat from people who believe they have a right to him. Update 2. It had been quiet for the past week since Penny had been following me, and I believed perhaps they'd finally understood. But I ought to have known better. Yesterday marked my day off, and my plan was to simply remain home with the baby, catching up on laundry and other chores. But near noon, Sandra tapped on my door, appearing quite concerned. She mentioned that Penny had visited her apartment that morning, inquiring about me and the baby, and asserting that she was concerned for my mental well-being. Sandra relayed that Penny had informed her I was behaving erratically, and that the family worried I might harm myself or the baby. I felt as though I would be sick, because I grasped Penny was attempting to construct a case against me, prompting my neighbors to claim I was unstable. Sandra stated she informed Penny I was an excellent mother and that she ought to leave me in peace. However, Penny persisted, querying if Sandra had observed me behaving oddly or neglecting the baby. Sandra mentioned Penny also inquired about my work timetable and when I was typically home alone with the baby, and if I had any assistance caring for him. She remarked that it seemed Penny was collecting details for some purpose, and that this made her truly uneasy. I expressed gratitude to Sandra for informing me and for withholding any details from Penny, and then I contacted the police to report the unwelcome conduct. The officer who arrived was very kind and stated that what Penny was doing could certainly be deemed stalking and harassment, especially considering the background involving the false CPS report. He advised I should record everything and that if it persisted, I could obtain a restraining order, but that they couldn't take much action regarding someone asking questions in the neighborhood unless it intensified. He did mention he would patrol more frequently to monitor the situation, which offered me some comfort. But then this morning, that's when the real trouble started. I was preparing for work and getting the diaper bag ready when someone pounded on my door vigorously as if attempting to force it open. I glanced through the peephole and saw Fiona standing there, looking utterly incensed. I was reluctant to open the door, but she began shouting that she was aware I was inside, and that we had to speak immediately. She was making such a racket that I was concerned the neighbors might object, or that she would disturb the baby's sleep. So I opened the door, but left the chain lock engaged. She instantly began yelling at me about my immense selfishness, and how Penny was experiencing a breakdown because of me. I told her to reduce her volume and that she had to depart, but she continued shouting and attempting to force the door open. She claimed that Penny was admitted to the hospital yesterday because she attempted to harm herself, and that it was entirely my fault for withholding the baby from her. I felt awful about Penny harming herself, but I also realized that wasn't my obligation, and that she required professional assistance, not my baby. I informed Fiona that I regretted Penny's struggles, but I wasn't accountable for her mental well-being, and giving her my baby wouldn't resolve her issues. Fiona began yelling that I was callous and cruel, and that Penny might die because of me. Then she stated that if I genuinely cared about the baby's best interests, I would allow Penny to adopt him before something awful occurred, and that she wouldn't permit me to wreck everyone's lives because I was too obstinate to do what was proper. I questioned her about what she implied by something terrible occurring, and she replied that accidents frequently happen to young mothers who are unsure of what they're doing, and that it would be disastrous if something befell me and the baby had no one to look after him. The manner in which she spoke sounded like a menace, and I became truly frightened. I informed her that if she was menacing me, I was contacting the police immediately, and she claimed she wasn't menacing anyone. She was merely highlighting that life was uncertain. I shut the door forcefully in her face and dialed 911, while she was still banging on it and shouting. The police arrived very quickly and discovered Fiona, still outside my building, screaming about how I was causing her daughter's demise. They spoke with her for a while and then came to speak with me, and I explained everything that had transpired, including the veiled threat about accidents happening to young mothers. The officer remarked that was clearly threatening language, and that along with the stalking and harassment, it was sufficient for a restraining order. They took Fiona into custody for disturbing the peace and threatening actions, and I gave them a comprehensive statement detailing everything that had occurred over the last month. The officer mentioned they would advise that I obtain an emergency restraining order against both Fiona and Penny, and that I ought to speak with an attorney regarding pressing charges. I reported sick from work as I was too rattled to leave the baby, and I've been a bundle of nerves all day, flinching at every noise. Sandra visited and remained with me for some time, assisting me in finding lawyers who deal with restraining orders and family harassment cases. I located one who focuses on this sort of issue and has an opening tomorrow morning. Sandra will look after the baby while I attend the meeting with her, as I prefer not to take him out publicly until I'm certain Fiona and Penny cannot approach us. The attorney I spoke with by phone stated that Fiona and Penny's actions constitute a distinct pattern of harassment, and that the warning about accidents occurring was certainly grounds for a restraining order. She mentioned that inaccurate CPS reports, coupled with stalking and threats, frequently escalate, and that I was wise to document all details. She also mentioned that I ought to think about relocating if feasible, since individuals this fixated on obtaining a child occasionally persist, even with restraining orders active. That frightens me because I cannot afford to relocate presently, and I don't cease even with protective orders in effect. That truly frightens me as I'm unable to move at this time, and I possess no other place to reside. I constantly reflect on Fiona's comment regarding accidents occurring, pondering if she genuinely intended to harm me or merely sought to intimidate me. Regardless, I no longer feel secure, and I'm apprehensive about being by myself with the baby. I never imagined my own relatives would attempt to ruin my life because of a child. But I suppose I truly didn't understand them whatsoever. The Fiona who brought me up following my parents' passing would never have acted this way, but perhaps that individual never truly was. I intend to obtain that restraining order tomorrow and pursue charges if the attorney believes I have a valid claim. I will also inquire about transferring the matter to family court, as I'm concerned they might attempt to leverage Penny's suicide attempt to assert I'm an unsuitable mother for some motive. This entire scenario is absurd, and I can't fathom it's my actual existence, but I will contend for my son regardless of the cost. He is blameless in all of this, and he merits safety and protection from individuals who would exploit him as a piece in their twisted schemes. I will provide an update after I meet with the attorney tomorrow, assuming nothing else outlandish occurs between now and then. My gratitude goes out to everyone who has been assisting me throughout this ordeal. It truly helps to realize that I'm not imagining things and that others comprehend how chaotic this circumstance is. In a final update, I met with the attorney and secured the emergency restraining orders approved for both Fiona and Penny. And I wish to give you all one last update, since some individuals have been inquiring about what transpired. The protective orders were quite straightforward to obtain because I possessed all the necessary documentation and the police reports, and the lawyer remarked it was one of the most evident instances of harassment she had encountered. Both Fiona and Penny must maintain a distance of at least 500 feet from me and my son, and they are prohibited from contacting me either directly or via other individuals. The attorney additionally assisted me in filing charges for submitting false reports to CPS and for stalking and harassment. She stated that while it's challenging to ascertain who initiated the CPS call, as they are designed to safeguard the caller's identity, the consistent pattern of conduct indicates it was part of a continuous effort to have my baby removed. Fiona was released from custody the day following her arrest, but she breached the restraining order almost instantly by having other family members contact me in an attempt to persuade me to withdraw the charges. Every instance someone called on her behalf, I reported it to the authorities, and now she is facing further charges for breaching the protective order. Penny was discharged from the hospital, and it seems her husband Owen finally recognized how unhinged the entire situation had become, leading him to file for divorce. The attorney mentioned that the charges would likely lead to probation and compulsory counseling for both of them, which suits me well. I don't particularly wish for them to be incarcerated, but I desire it to be officially noted that their actions were wrong and illegal. Regarding relocating, I located a modest apartment on the other side of town that's within my financial means, and Sandra will assist me with packing and moving next weekend. It's unfortunate that I have to disrupt my life because of their fixation, but I'll feel more secure knowing they don't know where I reside. My new residence is actually nearer to my job and within a better school district, so it could ultimately prove to be a blessing in disguise. Sandra will miss us, but she mentioned she comprehends why I must relocate and that she'll come visit once I'm established. My job has been exceptionally supportive throughout this ordeal, and my supervisor even offered me a modest pay increase, stating that when I feel prepared, a supervisory role might become available, which would include improved benefits. It's comforting to realize that certain individuals have faith in me and consider me capable of more than merely being an impoverished single mother. The protective orders are valid for 1 year and can be extended if required, but I hope by that time Fiona and Penny will have received the assistance they require and progressed with their lives. That's all from me, and I likely won't update again unless something major occurs. But hopefully this is the end of the drama, and we can simply live our lives in peace now. Now this next one will really shock you. So, some background first, because this situation makes no sense without context. And believe me, there's a lot of context I'm still trying to grasp. I've been married to my husband Albert for 3 years now, and we've been together for 5 years in total. I believe things were going quite well between us, until this whole situation exploded in our faces. Albert was married before to a woman named Irene. They were together for about 8 years in total, married for 5 of those. They divorced roughly 2 years before Albert and I began dating. The divorce was messy from what I gather, with much fighting about money and property, and Irene supposedly cheated on him with a man from her work, which is what ended things. But Albert doesn't really discuss it much, and I never pressed, because honestly I don't truly care about his past relationships as long as they remain in the past where they belong. Now, Albert's mother, Denise, is a whole other story, and I should have seen this coming from the start. But I suppose I was trying to give her the benefit of the doubt, which, looking back, was likely my first mistake. Denise never truly warmed up to me from day one, and I could tell she was constantly comparing me to Irene, even though she never said it directly, just little comments here and there about how Irene used to do this or that, how Irene was so good at cooking or decorating or whatever. I attempted to simply disregard it, thinking she'd eventually warm up to me once she got to know me better. But 3 years have passed, and she still behaves as if I'm merely a temporary part of Albert's life, despite us being married and discussing having children soon. Denise has always been rather dramatic and high maintenance, and Albert has consistently just agreed to her wishes since she raised him as a single mother after his father passed away when he was 12. I believe he feels a sense of guilt for not being present enough, or something similar. So when Denise began mentioning her desire to downsize from her large home to something smaller, now that she's retired, Albert promptly intervened and offered to help her locate something and cover its cost as a present. I wasn't overly pleased about spending such a large sum without truly discussing it beforehand, but Albert was extremely enthusiastic about being able to do something thoughtful for his mother. Truthfully, our finances are quite healthy, so I didn't make a fuss about it, even though we're discussing roughly $400,000 for a pleasant small house in a good area. Albert discovered this ideal small house for Denise, with 2 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, and a pleasant small yard, situated near her friends, her church, and all the locations she enjoys visiting. He purchased it outright as a surprise for her 65th birthday back in March. Denise cried and hugged him, saying it was the most amazing gift anyone had ever given her, and how proud she felt to have such a thoughtful son. I was standing right there, but she didn't acknowledge me at all, even though half that money was technically mine too, given that we'd share our finances. But regardless, I was happy that she was happy, and Albert was virtually beaming with pride, so I kept my mouth shut about feeling left out. Denise moved into the new house in April and spent the next few months decorating, settling in, and making it precisely how she wanted it. Albert would go over there every weekend to help with minor projects and repairs, and I would typically accompany him because that's what married couples do. They spend time with family together. Except Denise would always find ways to get Albert off doing something by himself, while she'd make awkward small talk with me, or simply ignore me completely and focus on her neighbor who'd come over, or call one of her friends to chat while I sat there feeling like an idiot. So last month, Denise began discussing having a housewarming party to show off the new place to all her friends and family. Albert becomes quite excited and begins helping her plan it, inquiring about who she's going to invite and what kind of food she wishes to serve and all that stuff. I'm listening to all this planning and assuming, of course, that I'm invited because I'm Albert's wife and I helped pay for the damn house, even if she doesn't want to acknowledge that part. However, Denise never actually says anything to me directly about the party. She just keeps talking to Albert about it whenever I'm around. Then about 2 weeks ago, Albert comes home from work, and he's got this weird look on his face. I can tell something's bothering him, but he's trying to act normal, and I hate when people do that because it just makes everything more awkward. So I ask him what's wrong, and he says Denise called him at work to finalize the guest list for the party, and there's something he needs to talk to me about. I'm thinking, okay, maybe she wants me to bring a specific dish or help with decorations or something, but no, that's not it at all. Albert sits me down, and he's doing that thing where he's trying to find the right words and taking forever to get to the point. I'm getting more anxious by the second because I can tell this is going to be bad news. Finally, he just comes out with it and says that Denise doesn't want me to come to the housewarming party because she invited Irene, and she doesn't want things to be awkward between us. I just stared at him for a minute because I honestly thought I heard him wrong. There's no way his mother would invite his ex-wife to a party celebrating a house that we bought for her and then tell me I can't come. But no, that's precisely what occurred. And Albert is sitting there explaining to me how Denise encountered Irene a few weeks prior, and they started chatting. Denise brought up the new house in the party, and seemingly invited her right then and there. When Albert questioned Denise about why she didn't consider asking him first, before inviting his former wife to anything, Denise stated that she and Irene had always been good friends, and that Irene had been a part of the family for 8 years. She didn't understand why they needed to cease being friends simply because the marriage failed. At this point, I'm attempting to make sense of this, so I inquire of Albert if Denise is aware that Irene betrayed him. Perhaps she'd forgotten or doesn't grasp why they separated. But Albert responds, no, Denise is fully aware of what occurred, and she still considers Irene a wonderful individual who simply made an error. My anger is rising rapidly, yet I'm striving to remain composed, and I questioned Albert about his response to his mother when she shared this plan with him. He states he informed her it was not suitable, and that if she wished to uphold a friendship with Irene, that was her decision, but she ought not to exclude me from family gatherings. Then I asked what Denise's reply was to that, and Albert became even more ill at ease. He conveyed that Denise informed him she had already extended an invitation to Irene, and did not wish to uninvite her, as that would be impolite. But she likewise did not desire my presence, because she was concerned I might utter something to make Irene ill at ease, or create conflict. That's when I entirely lost my temper, because I have never once initiated conflict at any family occasion. I hardly speak at family get-togethers since Denise and her companions control every discussion, and I primarily just sit there smiling and nodding like a fool. I informed Albert that this was utterly absurd, and that I found it unbelievable his mother would favor his unfaithful former wife over his current wife, and that I would not stand for this. Albert stated he fully agreed with me, and that he had already told Denise she must either invite both of us or neither of us, as he was not going to choose between his wife and his former wife. I thought, all right, good, he's defending me and our marriage, and Denise would realize her absurdity and rectify this. But then the next day, Albert returned home, and he appeared even more troubled than before. It was evident the conversation with Denise had not gone well. It transpired that Denise reacted furiously when Albert presented her the ultimatum, and charged him with being controlling and allowing me to manipulate him against his own family. She stated that I was clearly jealous of Irene and attempting to create discord between Denise and Albert, and that Albert was committing a grave error by choosing a jealous, scheming wife over his affectionate mother who desired only his welfare. This is where I believe I may have gone too far, but truthfully, I was so enraged I could not think clearly, and the words simply escaped my lips before I could prevent them. I informed Albert that if his mother wished to play games and bar me from family gatherings, while extending an invitation to the woman who ruined his initial marriage, then perhaps she did not merit the home we acquired for her. I stated that if Denise chose to favor Irene rather than me, then she could have Irene purchase a house for her instead of depending on the kindness of the son she was openly disrespecting. Albert became silent for an extended period, and I observed him pondering. I began to fear that perhaps I had pressed too intensely, and he would ultimately align with his mother. But then he responded that I was correct, and that his mother was acting utterly unsuitable and disrespectful towards our marriage, and that deeds bear consequences. He stated he would phone Denise and inform her that if she did not desire my presence at the housewarming celebration, then no housewarming celebration would occur at all, as he was reclaiming the property. To be clear, I wish to state that I never truly anticipated Albert following through with reclaiming the house. I was simply so vexed and wounded that I was venting and uttering remarks to emphasize the injustice of this entire circumstance. But Albert has always viewed matters in very clear-cut terms, and once his decision is made on an issue, he does not relent. Evidently, he had concluded that his mother had crossed an irreversible boundary. Thus, Albert phones Denise the following evening, and I am seated directly there, hearing his portion of the discussion. I could discern Denise yelling at him over the phone, even without him using the speaker function. Albert calmly informed her that she had a decision to make. She could either invite me to the party and make it clear I was welcome and wanted there, or she could find another place to live, because he was reclaiming the house. Denise was entirely losing her composure, calling him names and claiming he was being manipulated by his wicked wife, and that she couldn't believe he would threaten his own mother over a woman he'd only been with for 5 years. The discussion continued for approximately 20 minutes, with only Denise shouting and Albert remaining calm, reiterating that this was her decision and that he wouldn't keep funding her lifestyle if she couldn't show fundamental respect to his wife. Eventually, Denise disconnected the call with him, and Albert turned to me, saying that we'd likely hear from her again once she settled down and grasped his earnestness. However, Denise did not become composed. Instead, she intensified her stance and began contacting other family members to inform them what a dreadful son Albert was being and how I had coerced him into menacing his own mother with homelessness over a party invitation. Albert's aunt phoned him the following day and stated she found it inconceivable he would be so unkind to Denise, and that she was concerned about his psychological well-being if he was prepared to undertake such a drastic action. As I sit here, hearing all this family conflict developing, I'm beginning to feel like perhaps I truly am the issue here, because everyone seems to believe that threatening to reclaim a house over a party invitation is utterly irrational. 3 days after Albert's phone call with Denise, she shows up at our house unannounced. She's clearly been crying, but she's also furious, and she begins yelling at both of us the moment we open the door. She's going on and on about how she raised Albert by herself and sacrificed everything for him, and this is how he repays her, by threatening to make her homeless because his jealous wife can't handle the fact that he had a life before her. She says that Irene was like a daughter to her, and that just because Albert couldn't keep his wife happy doesn't mean Denise should have to lose someone she cares about. That's when I snapped, because I have been patient and understanding, and tried to build a relationship with this woman for over 3 years, and she has not once tried to make me feel welcome or wanted in this family. I told Denise that Irene stopped being her daughter-in-law the moment she chose to cheat on Albert and destroy their marriage, and that it was entirely inappropriate for Denise to maintain a close friendship with someone who hurt her son like that. I said that if Denise wanted to be friends with Irene, that was her business, but she didn't get to exclude me from family events to make room for Albert's ex-wife. Denise began screaming at me about how I was a manipulative little bitch who had turned her son against her, and that she knew from the start that I was no good for Albert. She said that Irene never would have behaved like this, and that Irene understood what family loyalty meant, and wouldn't have attempted to drive a wedge between a mother and son. I completely lost my temper and told Denise that maybe if Irene was so perfect, she should invite her to move in and look after her, instead of depending on the son she was treating so poorly. Albert intervened then and told his mother that she had to leave our home at once, and that she owed me an apology for how she was addressing me. Denise turned on Albert and said she couldn't believe he was picking some woman over his own mother, and that his father would be ashamed of the man he'd become. Albert's face turned completely white when she mentioned his dad, and he told Denise that she had precisely 24 hours to choose if she wanted to keep the house or continue excluding me from family gatherings, but she couldn't have both. Denise departed after that and didn't reach out to us for 4 days. I was beginning to think maybe she had chosen to back down, and we could all move forward and leave this in the past. However, yesterday, Albert receives a call from Denise, and she's crying and apologizing, saying she'd been reflecting on everything and she realizes she was mistaken to exclude me from the party. She says she wishes to set things right, and she's going to phone Irene and uninvite her so that I can attend instead, and we can all be one big happy family once more. But here's the thing, and this is where I think I might be going too far, but I cannot help how I feel about this. I don't want to go to Denise's party any longer, because the sole reason she's inviting me now is that Albert threatened to reclaim the house. She's not inviting me because she wishes me there, or because she recognizes I'm part of the family. She's inviting me because she's being compelled to, and I don't want to go somewhere I'm not truly wanted. Plus, the fact that her initial instinct was to protect Albert's cheating ex-wife's feelings over mine reveals everything I need to know about how she truly feels about me, and I don't think that's likely to change just because she's being compelled into including me. I told Albert that I valued him standing up for me, but that I no longer wanted to go to the party because Denise had made it evident that I was unwelcome, and I wasn't going to force myself into a situation where I'd be surrounded by people who didn't want me there. Albert said he understood how I felt, but that perhaps this could be a chance for me and Denise to start afresh and build a stronger relationship, now that she knew he was serious about prioritizing our marriage. But I don't think Denise learned anything from this, other than that Albert will use money to get his way. And I think she's likely to resent me even more now, because she probably blames me for almost losing her home. I believe she's going to spend the remainder of our marriage waiting for Albert and me to divorce, so she can revert to pretending I never existed and embracing Irene back into the family with open arms. The party is scheduled for this weekend, and Denise keeps phoning Albert, inquiring if we're attending and what she can do to make me feel more at ease. It all feels so artificial and coerced that it makes my skin crawl. I keep recalling how she yelled at me and insulted me and stated that Irene was superior to me, and I simply cannot picture sitting in her living room, feigning like everything is okay between us when we both know it isn't. Albert believes I should attend the party, because he says this is Denise's method of attempting to make amends, and that if I don't go, it will merely demonstrate to his family that I genuinely trying to keep him apart from them. But I feel that attending the party would be rewarding Denise's poor conduct and demonstrating to her that she can treat me however she desires, as long as she apologizes afterward when there are repercussions. The truth is, I don't even care about the foolish party anymore. I care about the reality that when Denise had to select between making me feel included and making Albert's ex-wife feel comfortable, she chose the ex-wife without a moment's hesitation. Albert's family is still phoning him, attempting to persuade him that he's being irrational and that threatening to reclaim the house went too far. Maybe they're right, but I can't help feeling that if we back down now, then Denise will know she can treat me however she wants, because Albert will always choose keeping peace in the family over standing up for his wife. I can't live the rest of my life being treated like a second-class citizen in my own husband's family, because his mother can't let go of his ex-wife. So I guess what I'm asking is, am I the asshole for telling Albert to take back the house his mother bought her when she chose to invite his ex-wife instead of me? And am I the asshole for not wanting to go to her party now, even though she's apologized and invited me? Because honestly, I don't know anymore, and I'm tired of thinking about it. I just want to know if I'm being reasonable, or if I've completely lost my mind over a party invitation that probably doesn't even matter in the grand scheme of things. Update. Well, I wasn't expecting this to blow up like it has, but I guess I should update everyone on what happened since I posted this. Honestly, I'm still trying to process everything that went down, but here goes. So after I posted this, I showed Albert some of the comments people were leaving, and we talked for a long time about the whole situation and what we should do about the party this weekend. Albert said he had been thinking about it too, and he was starting to wonder if maybe we had gone too far with the house threat. But he still felt that his mother was entirely out of line with the whole ex-wife thing, and he wasn't sure how to fix it without setting a precedent, allowing her to treat me badly whenever she wanted. We decided Albert would call Denise and tell her that we appreciated her apology and her willingness to uninvite Irene, but that I still wasn't comfortable attending the party because too much had been said and done. We all needed some time to calm down before we tried to mend our relationship. Albert planned to suggest that perhaps we could all have dinner together in a few weeks, once everyone had settled, and we could begin anew without all the drama and pressure of the party. However, before Albert could make that call, Denise appeared at our house again yesterday afternoon, and this time she brought backup in the form of Albert's Aunt Holly and his cousin Carol. They were evidently there for some sort of intervention. Denise had been crying again, looking terrible, and she began speaking right away about how she hadn't slept in days and was making herself ill, worrying about losing her son and her house. She simply wanted everything to return to normal. Holly chimed in, saying that the entire family was concerned about Albert, and that everyone believed I was having a negative influence on him because the Albert they knew would never threaten his own mother in this way. Carol mentioned that she had spoken with Irene and that Irene felt awful about causing problems between Albert and Denise, and that Irene had actually suggested that perhaps she shouldn't attend the party if it was going to cause issues. That's when Denise uttered something that made everything fall into place for me, and I realized this entire situation was even worse than I had imagined. Denise mentioned that she had also spoken with Irene, and that Irene had been so kind and understanding about the entire situation, and had offered to help mediate between Denise and Albert, because she knew him so well and understood how to talk to him when he was being stubborn. I glanced at Albert, and I could see that he was piecing together the same information I was because his face grew very stern. He questioned Denise precisely how many times she had spoken with Irene since encountering her. Denise became defensive and stated she didn't see why that was important, but Holly mentioned something about how Denise and Irene had been exchanging texts quite frequently over the past few weeks, and how Irene had been so supportive during this challenging period. So Albert directly questioned Denise if she had been discussing our marriage and our personal affairs with his ex-wife. Denise became even more defensive and claimed that Irene was just a friend who was trying to assist, and that Albert was being paranoid and suspicious without cause. But then Carol let it slip that Irene had said something about Albert always being stubborn when he felt attacked, and that he usually came around if you gave him time and space to consider things. Albert's entire demeanor shifted, and he told Denise that he wanted to know precisely what she had told Irene about our marriage and about this whole situation with the house and the party. Denise tried to say it wasn't important, but Albert continued to press. Finally, Denise confessed that she had informed Irene about how I was attempting to control Albert and turn him against his family, and how she was concerned that Albert was making a misstep by choosing me over the people who truly loved him. That's when I realized that this entire situation wasn't merely about Denise wanting to uphold a friendship with Irene. This was about Denise deliberately collaborating with Albert's ex-wife to sabotage our marriage and portray me as the villain. Denise had been employing Irene as a sort of relationship expert to discern how to manipulate Albert and get him to choose her over me, and that's why she was so assured about leaving me out of the party initially. I told Denise that she had crossed a boundary that could not be uncrossed by including Albert's ex-wife in our private affairs and attempting to use her to manipulate our marriage. I stated that this was no longer about jealousy or insecurity. This concerned Denise actively undermining our marriage with someone who had already demonstrated she couldn't be trusted with upholding marriage vows. Denise began crying and saying I was twisting everything and making it sound worse than it was, and that she simply wanted her family back the way it used to be. But Albert cut her off, stating that the family had changed when he got divorced, and changed again when he married me, and that Denise needed to accept Irene wasn't part of our family anymore, and stop trying to use her to fix problems in our relationship. Holly tried to jump in and defend Denise, saying that we were being too harsh, and that Denise was just scared of losing her son and maybe making some poor choices, but that didn't make her a terrible person. But Albert said that threatening to exclude his wife from family events, while including his cheating ex-wife, wasn't a poor choice. It was an attack on our marriage, and he wasn't going to tolerate it anymore. Then Albert told Denise that the house situation was no longer negotiable, and that she had 30 days to find somewhere else to live because he was done being manipulated and having his personal business discussed with his ex-wife behind his back. Denise completely lost it and started screaming about how she was being punished for caring about Albert and trying to help him see that he was making a mistake with me. Holly and Carol tried to calm Denise down, but she just kept getting more and more hysterical, saying that I had destroyed her family and turned her son into someone she didn't recognize. She claimed that Albert had once been such a loving son who would never treat his mother like this, and that I had poisoned him against her from the start, and now I was attempting to make her homeless. I finally had enough and informed Denise that she had made her choice when she decided to collaborate with Albert's ex-wife against me, and that actions have consequences. I stated that if she wanted to play games and manipulate people, then she could find someone else to fund her lifestyle, because we were done being her victims. Denise turned to Albert one final time and pleaded with him to reconsider, saying that she would do anything to make this right, and that she would never speak to Irene again if that's what it took to keep her house and her relationship with her son. But Albert replied it was too late for that, and that trust, once broken, couldn't be easily mended, and that Denise had shown her true colors when she thought she could get away with it. After they left, Albert and I spoke for hours about everything that had occurred and how we wanted to handle moving forward. Albert said he felt terrible about the entire situation, but that he couldn't allow his mother to undermine our marriage with his ex-wife and expect there to be no consequences. He mentioned he had been wondering why Denise seemed so confident that he would eventually come around and choose her over me, and now he understood that Irene had been coaching her on how to handle him. I asked Albert if he thought we should give Denise another opportunity, and perhaps let her keep the house if she promised to cut ties with Irene and respect our marriage moving forward. But Albert replied that the issue wasn't solely about Irene. It was about Denise's basic lack of respect for me and for our marriage, and that he didn't believe that would change merely because she was being compelled to conceal it better. So, as of this moment, Denise has 30 days to move out of the house, and Albert is going to sell it. We're going to use the money for a down payment on a larger house for ourselves, since we're planning to start trying for kids, soon regardless. Albert's extended family is furious with both of us, and we're likely going to be excluded from family gatherings for a while. But honestly, I'm fine with that, because I'd rather be excluded for standing up for myself than included as someone's punching bag. I know some people are going to think we went too far and that we should have tried harder to resolve things with Denise, but I feel like we gave her multiple opportunities to do the right thing, and she chose to make things worse by involving Albert's ex-wife in our personal affairs. I don't regret standing up for myself, and I don't regret Albert standing up for our marriage, even though it's likely going to cost us his relationship with his mother, and perhaps some other family members too. The final story for today. I'm 28, and I work as a maintenance supervisor at an apartment complex. It offers decent pay, and I've been saving for years because I aim to do something special for my parents, who've been having financial struggles ever since my dad lost his factory job 2 years ago, and my mom's part-time retail job barely covers groceries. They were behind on their mortgage, their credit card debt was accumulating, and their car made a terrible grinding noise whenever they drove it. Plus, the air conditioning stopped working last summer, and they couldn't afford to repair it. I'd been watching them fret about money for months, and it truly pained me, as they're good people who've toiled hard their entire lives and brought me up well. I kept recalling how much they sacrificed during my upbringing, like my mom would pack these small lunches for work so there'd be more food for me and my sister, and my dad would drive that same old beat-up truck for 15 years, because he used to say new cars were for wealthy people. They never directly asked me for assistance, but I could observe the worry lines deepening on their faces with each visit, and my mom began purchasing generic brand everything at the grocery store, even the toilet paper that felt like sandpaper. So I decided to surprise them, and I'm talking about a real surprise here. Not just paying one bill, but completely changing their situation, because I wanted them to feel secure again and not have to choose between paying the electric bill or buying medication. I had been saving money for a down payment on my own house, but I realized that could wait because my parents needed help right now. And what good is buying a house when the people who raised me are drowning in debt and driving a car that might break down any day? I spent weeks organizing this entire plan. First, I called their mortgage company and paid off the remaining balance, which was about $47,000. Then I contacted all their credit card companies and paid off every single debt they had, which came to another 23,000. Then I contacted all their credit card companies and paid off every single debt they had, which came to another 23,000. And then I went to the Honda dealership and bought them a brand new 2024 CRV in silver, my mom's favorite color, fully loaded with heated seats and a backup camera, and everything they never thought they could afford. The plan was to surprise them on Sunday when they arrived home from church, because that's when the whole family usually gathers at their house for dinner. And I wanted everyone to be there to see their reaction when they realized their financial stress was over and they had a beautiful new car sitting in their driveway. I had been so excited about this for weeks. I could barely sleep the night before because I kept picturing how happy they would be, and how my mom would likely shed those good tears, and my dad would get all emotional but try to hide it. I arrived at their house early and parked the new CRV right in the driveway with a massive red bow on top. Then I waited inside with my sister Sarah, who was the sole person aware of the surprise, because I needed assistance coordinating everything. When my parents drove up in their old Honda and spotted the new car, my mom literally shrieked, and my dad simply stood there with his mouth agape. For about 10 minutes, everything was perfect. My mom was gliding her hands over the paintwork and examining the interior, while my dad was inspecting all the features, and they kept inquiring whose car it was and if someone was visiting. So I finally informed them it was theirs, and that I had also paid off their house and all their credit card debts. The expression on their faces was everything I had hoped for. My mom began weeping and embracing me, and my dad became choked up and kept repeating he couldn't believe it. But then my cousin Derek appeared, and this is where everything went awry, because Derek is one of those individuals who always needs to make everything about themselves and cannot tolerate when someone else receives attention. Derek works in tech, earning around $150,000 annually, and he never allows anyone to forget it, always discussing his stock options, his loft, and flaunting his Tesla. He's been the favorite child of the family ever since he graduated from college. Derek looks at the car and immediately begins inquiring about its cost and how I could afford it with my salary. And I ought to have noticed the warning signs then, because he had that tone in his voice, like he was preparing to make me appear bad. I attempted to dismiss it, stating I had been saving and wished to do something kind for my parents, but Derek wouldn't drop it and continued pressing for the precise figures. My parents are still emotional and thankful at this moment, and my dad is informing Derek that I had also paid off the house. And Derek's face just entirely alters, as if someone flicked a switch. He begins rambling about how this isn't financially sensible, and how I'm likely putting myself in a disadvantageous situation. And he's uttering all this before everyone, as if he's some sort of financial advisor, instead of simply being pleased for my parents. Then my Aunt Linda arrives, who is Derek's mom, and my dad's sister, and Derek immediately starts recounting to her what I did. But he's presenting it as though I made a reckless decision, rather than something generous. Aunt Linda has always been envious of my parents for some reason, so now Derek and Aunt Linda are whispering in the corner while my parents are still admiring the car, and I can sense something is brewing, because Derek keeps glancing over at me with that smug expression. My sister Sarah is attempting to change the topic and direct everyone's attention to dinner, but you can feel the tension in the atmosphere, like an approaching storm. That's when Derek decides to really show his ass and declares, for all to hear, that it's funny how I'm acting like a big shot when I probably earn less in a year than he earns in 3 months. Right then, unprovoked, criticizing my work and earnings when I had just done something remarkably generous for my parents. I told Derek that this wasn't about wealth or flaunting it. It was about helping family. But he wasn't finished because apparently he had been eager for an opportunity to put me in my place. He begins to rant about how I'm a maintenance worker while he's in tech, and how I likely don't grasp the tax consequences of what I just did, and how I should have consulted with someone knowledgeable about finances before making such a significant financial decision. My mom attempts to make Derek stop, but he was unstoppable now. And he says maybe, rather than purchasing cars I can't afford, I should concentrate on pursuing a real career, like he did, and that's when I totally lost my temper. Because this fellow has never performed a day of manual labor in his life, and has no idea what actual work looks like. I told Derek that at least I don't dedicate my time disparaging family members who are trying to help, and that some of us measure success by more than merely our bank account. But Derek simply laughs and says that's what people say when they lack money. Aunt Linda intervenes, stating Derek is simply being practical and considering everyone's best interests, which is absolute rubbish, because Derek has never considered anyone but himself. Then my dad, whom I expected to defend me or at least tell Derek to step back, says that Derek makes a valid point about being financially prudent, and perhaps I should have discussed it with them before making such a significant decision. I was stunned by what I was hearing because here I am, having just paid off their house and bought them a car, and my own father is siding with Derek instead of me. My mom joins in, stating she's thankful but concerned about whether I can truly afford all of this, and she's looking at me with a worried expression, as if I were a child incapable of managing money. The entire discussion had completely shifted from being about my generous present to being about my poor financial judgment, and I'm standing there feeling like I'm under attack from all directions. Derek then states, and I'll never forget this because it was so heartless, that it's sweet I wanted to help, but perhaps next time I should stick to presents more suitable for my income level, like a pleasant dinner or something. That's when my mom says, and this is what truly devastated me, that she values what I did but wishes I possessed Derek's career acumen, because then I would have discovered a more intelligent way to assist them that wouldn't jeopardize me. She's contrasting me with Derek directly to my face, after I had just given them all I had saved for my own future, and she's behaving as if Derek would have managed it more effectively. I stood there for a moment, simply processing what had transpired. How within 20 minutes I shifted from being the generous son who resolved all their problems to being the irresponsible one who required Derek's endorsement for my financial choices. My sister Sarah is gazing at me with a horrified expression because she can clearly see exactly what's unfolding, but everyone else is acting as if Derek's worries are entirely reasonable. I finally stated that I couldn't believe they were transforming my gift into a critique of my life choices, and that if they believed Derek was so much more astute with money, perhaps he should be the one assisting them instead of me. My dad says I'm being overly sensitive, and that they're simply trying to ensure I didn't harm myself financially. My mom says she never claimed anything was amiss with my job, but then she adds that she merely worries about my future, and whether I'll be able to construct the kind of life that Derek possesses. And there it is once more, the comparison to my cousin who earns more money and therefore must be superior to me somehow. Derek is simply standing there with a satisfied grin on his face, because he successfully converted my moment into his moment, where everyone is discussing how much more intelligent and prosperous he is compared to me. Aunt Linda is nodding in agreement and expressing how proud she is of Derek. I informed them all that I was finished with this discussion and that if they believed Derek was so much more capable at managing money, they could hand him the car keys and observe how generous he was inclined to be. My dad states I'm acting absurd, and that's not what anyone intended, but I was already heading toward the door because I could feel myself on the verge of completely erupting, and I didn't want to utter something I couldn't retract. My mom trails me and says I'm overreacting and that everyone is simply concerned about me, but I informed her that if she was genuinely concerned about me, she wouldn't have spent the past hour making me feel foolish for attempting to help. She states that's not fair and they're thankful for what I did, but then she inquires if I truly can afford it and whether I have sufficient funds remaining for emergencies. I simply looked at her and stated that it was too late to be concerned about that now, since the money was already expended, and perhaps next time she should consider defending her son instead of doubting his judgment in front of people who enjoy disparaging him. She began to utter something else, but I was already in my truck driving off, and I was so furious I had to pull over after a few blocks because my hands were trembling. I spent the following few days reflecting on what occurred and growing angrier each time I replayed it in my mind, because the more I considered it, the more I understood that Derek had orchestrated this entire situation. He saw a chance to make me look bad and took it, and my parents simply went along with it instead of telling him to be quiet and be grateful that someone helped them. The truly messed up part is that Derek has never once offered to help my parents with their money troubles. Now, I don't expect him to, since he's just my cousin, but helping family is a good thing to do. So I determined I wasn't going to let this pass, and I called the Honda dealership and informed them I wished to return the car. They said I had 3 days remaining on their satisfaction guarantee, and I could bring it back for a complete refund as long as it had under 200 miles on it. I also contacted my bank and had them undo the payments to the mortgage company and the credit card companies, which was tricky but achievable since everything had only just been processed and hadn't gone through all the final clearances yet. It incurred some fees for me, but I didn't care because I wasn't about to let my funds pay for a house and car that my parents were going to enjoy while believing Derek was superior to me. I drove over to my parents' place on Wednesday morning when I knew they would both be home, and I told them I was taking the car back and reversing all the payments. My mom immediately started crying and asking why I would do such a thing, and my dad grew quite angry and demanded to know what was wrong with me. I told them precisely what was wrong with me, that I used my life savings trying to assist them, and instead of being thankful, they spent the entire time making me feel like I was too foolish and poor to make sound decisions. I said that if Derek was so much more astute with money, they could ask him to settle their debts and purchase them a car. And let's see how that turned out for them. My dad claimed I was being childish and that I misjudged what occurred, but I told him there was no misjudgment. I heard precisely what he said about Derek having a valid point, and I heard my mom say she wished I had Derek's mind for my career. I said that when someone presents you with a gift worth $70,000, you say, "Thank you," not mock them instead. They both began pleading with me not to reclaim everything, and my dad stated they'd speak to Derek about what he said, but I told them the harm was already done, and I wasn't keen on coerced apologies or trying to make Derek act better. I said that Derek revealed his true nature, and they revealed theirs by concurring with him instead of defending me. I informed them they had until Friday to make alternative arrangements because that's when I was retrieving the CRV to return it to the dealership. My mom was fully sobbing at this point, and my dad was shouting about how I was punishing them for something Derek did, but I told them Derek didn't compel them to compare me to him or doubt my financial judgment. They chose to do that themselves. The banking process took more time to undo than I anticipated, because it seems when a mortgage is paid off, numerous legal procedures must be reversed, and the credit card firms were puzzled as to why I wished to reverse payments already posted to the accounts. I had to complete a lot of documents and incur some penalty charges, yet by Friday everything had returned to its previous state, except now my parents understood precisely how I felt about their response to my gift. I returned to retrieve the car, and both my parents were there, expecting me, and my dad tried one last time to dissuade me. He claimed they had learned their lesson and would never allow Derek to disrespect me again, and my mom expressed regret for making me feel undervalued. But I could tell they still didn't truly grasp it, because my dad kept discussing Derek as if the issue was merely Derek's rudeness, not their agreement with him. I informed them that the problem wasn't Derek's impoliteness. The problem was that after I gave them everything I had set aside for my own future, their initial reaction was to be concerned that I wasn't intelligent enough to make that choice. I stated that Derek didn't prompt those words from them. He simply gave them license to voice what they were already pondering. My mom attempted to argue that they were merely worried about me, but I inquired why her concern was greater about my monetary state after my assistance than previously, when they were the ones overwhelmed by debt. I said that if Derek hadn't been there, would they have spent the entire time doubting my judgment and comparing me to my cousin, or would they have simply been thankful? Neither of them could respond to that question, which revealed all I needed to learn about whether they genuinely valued what I endeavored to do for them. I took the car and drove it directly to the dealership, and the entire journey there I felt this strange blend of sadness and relief, like I was let down yet also pleased that I discovered their true sentiments about me before I squandered any further funds attempting to assist them. The dealership was quite accommodating about the entire return procedure, and I recovered most of my funds, less certain fees and the price of the bow and some other items. The mortgage and credit card reversals processed without significant issues, though I was required to pay some handling fees and accrued interest that had gathered. By the time all was resolved, my parents were back to their precise original financial state, save that now they were aware I possessed the funds to aid them, but opted not to due to their treatment of me. I believed that would conclude the matter, but evidently news spread among the family about the events that transpired, and now everyone holds views about my choice. Derek called me and dared to say that I overreacted and that he was just trying to look out for my best interests, as if I'm supposed to believe that his short talk about income levels and appropriate gifts was driven by concern for me. I told Derek that if he was so worried about family finances, he could start writing checks himself instead of critiquing other people's generosity. Aunt Linda has been calling my parents and telling them that I'm being cruel and spiteful, and that families should forgive each other's mistakes. She's also been telling people that I'm envious of Derek's success, and that's why I got so angry about his helpful advice, which is complete garbage because I was angry about being disrespected, not about Derek making more money than me. My sister Sarah is the only one who fully understands why I did what I did, because she was there and saw how quickly everyone turned on me after Derek started running his mouth. She said it was painful to watch because I was so excited about surprising our parents, and then Derek just ruined the whole moment with his jealousy and need to be the center of attention. My parents want to have a family meeting to talk through everything and try to fix the situation, but I don't see the point because nothing has truly changed. Derek still thinks he's better than me because he makes more money. My parents still think I should have consulted with someone smarter before helping them, and I still think they're all ungrateful and disrespectful. I'm not going to change my mind about the money, and they're not going to suddenly develop appreciation for what I tried to do for them. The car is returned, the debts are back on their accounts, and everyone knows where they stand with each other now. Some people might think I'm being too harsh, or that I should give them another chance, but I don't think I should have to beg my own family to respect me and appreciate my generosity. If they can't see the value in what I did without Derek's permission or commentary, then they don't deserve my help. I'm back to saving money for my own house now, and I'm not planning to spend it on anyone else's problems anytime soon. Let Derek help them if he's so smart about money and so concerned about family finances. I'll be over here building my own life and taking care of myself, since apparently that's what I should have been doing all along. Update 1. Well, this whole situation just got even more ridiculous, and I'm honestly shocked at how low my family is willing to go to make me look like the bad guy instead of just admitting they screwed up. So Derek apparently decided that a simple apology wasn't enough, and instead he's been going around telling everyone that I'm having some kind of mental breakdown, and that's why I overreacted to his helpful financial advice. He's been saying that I'm jealous of his success and that I made a rash emotional decision that I'll regret when I calm down and think clearly. My cousin Jennifer called me yesterday and said Derek told her that I was so desperate to compete with him that I spent money I couldn't afford just to show off. And when he tried to offer me some friendly advice, I lost it because I couldn't handle the truth about my financial situation. Jennifer knows Derek is full of crap because she's seen how he acts, but apparently he's been circulating this story to other family members who don't know me as well. The really messed up part is that Aunt Linda has been supporting Derek's account of events, telling people that Derek was just being responsible and looking out for me, and that I got angry because I knew he was right about me making a mistake. She's been portraying Derek as the mature, successful one who tried to help his struggling cousin, and me as the unstable one who can't handle constructive criticism. But here's where it gets truly absurd. My mom called me one night crying and saying that Derek offered to help them with their financial problems, but only if they promised to persuade me to apologize to him and admit that I was wrong. Apparently, Derek's exact words were that he's willing to step up and do what must be done for family. But first, they need to ensure I understand that my behavior was unacceptable. So Derek is actually holding my parents' financial security hostage until they compel me to grovel to him, and they're truly considering it because they're desperate and lack any other options. My mom says Derek told them he'd clear their mortgage and buy them a car, exactly as I intended, but he wants a public apology from me at the next family gathering where I confess that I was envious and mistaken. I told my mom that if she even considers agreeing to Derek's conditions, she's cut off from me, because that would mean she prizes his money above her own son's dignity. I said that Derek isn't providing help from a place of generosity. He's trying to degrade me and portray himself as the hero who rescued the situation after I failed. My mom says she doesn't want to hurt me, but they're truly struggling, and Derek's proposal would resolve all their problems. And perhaps it wouldn't be too awful to simply apologize if it allows everyone to progress. I couldn't fathom what I was hearing, that my own mother was proposing I should humiliate myself to appease Derek's ego just so she could have her bills settled. I told her that if she accepts Derek's deal, she'll be confirming all my suspicions about her priorities, and that she values money more than showing her own son respect. She started weeping more intensely and saying, "That's unjust, and she loves me, but she fears losing their home and is unsure of any other course of action." That's when I realized that my parents never truly understood what I did for them or why I did it, because if they did, they would never even consider allowing Derek to turn it into some kind of power play where I have to plead for forgiveness. They're treating my generous gift and Derek's manipulative offer like they're the same thing, when Derek is literally trying to purchase their loyalty against me. I told my mom that she needs to choose between Derek's money and having me in her life, because I'm not going to stick around and watch him buy his way into becoming the family's golden boy while I'm treated like the unstable screw-up who couldn't handle success. She pleaded with me not to make her choose, but I told her Derek had already made that choice when he decided to hold her financial problems hostage until I submitted to him. My dad phoned me the next day and tried a different approach, saying that perhaps we could work out some kind of compromise where I don't have to apologize, but I do have to acknowledge that Derek's concerns were valid. He says Derek is willing to help them regardless of what I do, but it would make things easier for everyone if I could just admit that I acted emotionally. I asked my dad if he even heard himself talking, because he was literally asking me to lie and say that Derek was right to disrespect me and tear down my gift in front of the entire family. I said that Derek's concerns weren't valid, they were jealous and cruel, and the fact that my dad couldn't see the difference showed me everything I needed to know about whose side he was truly on. My dad says I'm being too stubborn and that sometimes you have to swallow your pride for the good of the family. But I told him that Derek is the one who should be swallowing his pride and giving a genuine apology instead of trying to buy his way out of the consequences of his behavior. Then my dad says, and this is what truly infuriated me, that Derek has always been successful and skilled with money. So perhaps I should heed his advice instead of being so defensive about my choices. There it is again, the presumption that Derek's financial success makes him right about everything and makes my decisions automatically wrong. I told my dad that Derek's success doesn't grant him the right to tear me down in front of my family, and it doesn't make his opinion more valuable than my own feelings about being disrespected. I said that if he thinks Derek's money makes him a better judge of character than his own son, then perhaps he deserves to be in Derek's debt instead of debt-free. Sarah called me after she heard about Derek's offer, and she's as repulsed as I am about the entire situation. She says Derek is being utterly manipulative and that our parents are being weak for even considering his deal. But she also understands that they're afraid about their financial future and don't see any other way out. Sarah thinks I should stand firm and not give Derek the satisfaction of getting an apology out of me, even if it means our parents remain in debt. She says that if they choose Derek's money over my dignity, that tells us everything we need to know about their values and what kind of people they truly are. But then Sarah also said something that's been troubling me, which is that she's worried this whole situation is going to permanently harm our family, and that years from now, we'll all regret how things unfolded. She's not saying I should apologize, but she's wondering if there's some other way to settle this that doesn't end with our parents struggling financially and half the family estranged from each other. I told Sarah that I didn't cause this situation. Derek did when he decided to criticize me for my generosity, and our parents exacerbated it when they sided with him instead of defending me. I said that if the family is harmed, it's because Derek prioritized his ego over family harmony, and our parents prioritized his opinion over their son's feelings. The thing that truly bothers me is that Derek's offer confirms everything I suspected about him, which is that he never genuinely cared about helping our parents. He just wanted to ensure everyone knew he was more successful than me. If he actually cared about family, he would have helped them years ago when they initially struggled, instead of waiting until after I tried to help them, so he could exploit it as an opportunity to demean me. And now he's exploiting their desperation to coerce me into a degrading apology that he can hold over my head indefinitely, because if I yield to his demands, everyone will remember that Derek made me confess I was wrong and jealous and financially irresponsible. He's not trying to solve a problem. He's trying to win a competition that only existed in his mind. I've been considering what Sarah said about lasting damage to the family, and honestly, perhaps that's exactly what needs to occur. Perhaps we need to discover once and for all who values what, and who's willing to treat family members with fundamental respect versus who's willing to trade that respect for the right price. If my parents accept Derek's offer, I'll know that their affection is conditional on me remaining in my place and never doing anything that might make Derek feel insecure about his standing as the family success story. And if they don't accept his offer, Derek will know that his money can't purchase him the family adoration he believes he merits. Either way, at least, everyone will know where they stand with one another, which is better than pretending we're all close, while Derek gets to treat me like trash, and my parents get to benefit from my generosity, while secretly believing Derek is superior to me. I'm not going to apologize to Derek, and I'm not going to plead with my parents to choose me over his money. I did what I thought was right when I attempted to assist them, and I did what I thought was right when I withdrew that assistance after they disrespected me. Now they can do what they believe is right, and we'll all live with the consequences. Update 2. After my last update, my parents were supposed to meet with Derek to finalize the details of his offer to help them, but Derek never showed up and has been dodging their calls ever since. My mom called me Thursday night, crying, and saying that Derek had been texting her with excuses about being busy with work projects, but that he would get back to them soon about the payment schedule. I told my mom that Derek was obviously stalling and that his offer was probably never real to begin with, but she didn't want to hear it because accepting that would mean admitting that she chose his fake promise over her real son. She kept saying that Derek was a good person who wouldn't lie about something like that, and that he was probably just trying to work out the logistics of such a big financial commitment. But then Friday morning, my mom calls me in a complete panic because Derek's landlord had called her looking for him. Apparently, Derek gave my parents' number as a reference when he signed his lease, and now he's 3 months behind on rent and about to be evicted. The landlord was asking if my parents knew where Derek was because he's been avoiding calls, and they need to discuss payment arrangements, or else he's getting kicked out. My mom was confused because Derek had been bragging about his expensive loft for years, and she couldn't understand why someone who makes 6 figures would be behind on rent. I told her that perhaps Derek's financial situation wasn't as stable as he let on, and that might explain why his offer to help them was repeatedly delayed with vague excuses. Then Saturday afternoon, my cousin Jennifer phoned me with information that completely explains everything that's been happening. Apparently, Derek tried to borrow money from her last week, claiming he had a temporary cash flow problem, but would pay her back with interest as soon as his next stock options vested. Jennifer became suspicious because Derek had been bragging about his wealth for years, so she started asking questions about his job and his finances. It turns out that Derek was laid off from his tech company 4 months ago and has been living off credit cards and unemployment benefits ever since. But he's been too embarrassed to tell anyone in the family because his whole identity is built around being the successful one. The downtown loft he's always showing off, he can't afford the rent and is about to be evicted. And the Tesla he loves to brag about is getting repossessed next week because he's behind on the payments. Jennifer said that when she pressed Derek about his job situation, he completely broke down and admitted that he's been lying to everyone about his financial success because he couldn't stand the thought of the family knowing he was struggling. He's been putting everything on credit cards to maintain his lifestyle while job hunting. But the tech market is tough right now, and he hasn't been able to find anything that pays what his old job did. So when Derek was giving me all that grief about my financial decisions and acting like he was so much smarter with money, he was actually drowning in debt and likely jealous as hell that I had $70,000 in savings to help our parents, while he couldn't even pay his own rent. His entire speech about appropriate gifts for my income level was pure projection, because he was the one who couldn't afford to be generous, not me. He was literally playing games with my parents' financial security simply to feed his ego and make me look bad. I informed Jennifer that this explained everything about Derek's behavior, because successful people don't usually spend so much time tearing down other people's generosity unless they're insecure about their own situation. Derek wasn't attacking my gift because he considered it financially irresponsible. He was attacking it because it made him look bad by comparison when he couldn't help our parents himself. Jennifer agreed and mentioned that Derek had always been competitive and jealous, but losing his job had made him desperate to prove that he was still better than everyone else. She stated that Derek probably saw my generous gift as a threat to his position as the family's success story, especially since I work in maintenance, and he's always looked down on blue-collar jobs. So now the truth is emerging, and my parents are beginning to understand that Derek's offer was never genuine, which means they sacrificed their bond with me for absolutely nothing. My mom has been calling me constantly since Jennifer told her about Derek's true financial situation, pleading with me to forgive them and help them again. My mom repeatedly states that they were manipulated by Derek and that they're regretful for trusting his falsehoods over their own son's demonstrated generosity. She says that Derek exploited their vulnerable state and led them to believe his offer was genuine when he knew he couldn't deliver, and that she feels awful for preferring his false assurance over my genuine assistance. But I told my mom that Derek didn't force them to doubt my judgment and pit me against him. They made that choice themselves because they concurred with his evaluation of my life and career. I said that Derek's financial problems don't justify the fact that they allowed him to disparage me, and concluded he was correct about me being careless and unsuccessful. Sarah is incensed by the entire Derek situation and says that he's even more despicable than we imagined because he was prepared to offer our parents empty promises about their financial problems merely to boost his own self-importance. She says that Derek was aware he couldn't assist them but allowed them to think he could, which is heartless and deceptive on a level that exceeds mere jealousy. I'm not backing down on this, and I won't help them again, because Derek's dishonesty doesn't alter the fact that my parents were willing to throw me under the bus for the prospect of paid bills. They made clear what their priorities are and what they truly think of me, and Derek's money issues don't undo that or make their conduct any less hurtful.